colonization is about control. And last week, when you watched the video last week, lecture 4, which is a previous lecture that I did, but it was quite important that you watch it. We talk about the issue. We briefly mentioned it, and we asked the question: what is the symbiotic relationship between colonialism and fence? And you might have heard me say it might seem simplistic at best, but it is not, because it's a very important concept. Because as academics, one of the things you do as academics and as scientists, we look at patterns. We develop an eye, an epistemological eye. One of the questions you may ask yourself is, as you think about Caribbean thought, what is Caribbean epistemology? What is Caribbean theology? What is Caribbean? How do we practice our philosophy? How do we practice what is our epistemology? How do we arrive at truth? How do we gain knowledge? When we talk about epistemology, how do we arrive at truth? How do we gain knowledge? How do we know anything? Anything that you know right now, how do you know that it is true? And how have you come to know that? And is there room for human error? Is there room for investigation? And what does that mean? Nevertheless, when we asked about, when I was at UWI, I went to UWI after I finished at JTS, and I was introduced to philosophy, but African philosophy was I started learning about African philosophy, and there was, whether or not there was a Caribbean philosophy, but much of Caribbean philosophy is conservative colonial ideology that has been embedded or inherited and is yet to be drained. Fanon says that we have to begin, the Caribbean must begin a new history of man, and that history, we must begin as tabula rasas. I keep talking about Fanon. I hope by now you guys should start Googling Fanon and doing research about who is this Fanon that the professor keep talking about. He says in Black Skin, in one of the textbook that's on the syllabus. In fact, when I started teaching this course, it was one of the first texts. Dr. Garnet Roper had suggested this. But in The Wretched of the Earth, French Fanon, and hopefully we get some time to do that in the class today. Just quickly, we've introduced you to some important figures: Fanon, C.L.R. James, and so on. We must begin a new history of man. The Caribbean must begin a new history of man as we begin to take back our independence. But anyways, last week we talked about colonialism or colonization. We start introducing the concept of colonization from the video you watched, as you begin to conceptualize Caribbean within a uniquely academic and critical way. So you might have heard, what's the symbiotic relationship between colonization? And as I said, colonization has to do with the concept of control. To colonize is the control. And of course, Frantz Fanon in Wretched of the Earth talks about, describe it as depersonalization. It's the depersonalization of the human. Again, the idea of depersonalization, Fanon talks about depersonalization. Homi Bhabha, in her book Location of Culture, and Homi Bhabha actually wrote the foreword of Wretched of the Earth, herself and Richard Philcox, and she talks about how Fanon looks at the idea of colonization, which is again the depersonalization. What it is to deperson. To detox, to de-stress, you're getting rid of. So colonization is getting rid of the person and what that means to be a person. All the benefits of personhood. In fact, colonized people weren't persons. They were project, they were property. But anyways, then we talk about this Afrocentricity. And by the way, I dubbed last week's lecture, if you watch the tape, I dubbed it from from African from Africa to Arawak to African slaves or to slavery. The title of that lecture last week was a pun. A pun is a play upon words. A pun is a play upon words, but a pun. I am using a figurative expression because you might have heard of the book From Arawak to Africans. From Arawak to Africans. And I will actually, let me share my screen. Um, I want to share the timeline. Let's go back to my timeline. What is critical thinking? What is this? They said it was updated today. I'm thinking about sharing. Okay, I'm about to share my screen because I want to share. There is it. Here we go. Now I can go back to this. I can share my screen. All right, I'm sharing my screen. You are seeing the screen. Caribbean Thought 20 lecture presentation. List of some Caribbean thinkers. List of this is Andretius online, and if you were to go to ResearchGate, I'm on ResearchGate, and if you were to go to my lab on ResearchGate, you might have seen this very same timeline on ResearchGate, but it starts with number two is number one. So if you were to go on ResearchGate and it says list of some currents and reflections in the Caribbean. Number one, I started with Arawak to Africans. If you go to ResearchGate or previous lectures, that's where it would start at. But in this lecture, we start with Kemet and African history, the European invasion, hijack, and corruption. And of course, we start with ancient Africa, formerly Egypt or ancient Kemet. And of course, we read Amamazama, Afrocentric Maritime. There's also, if, oh, I didn't share with you the article. There's a paper by Kimani Nehushi that looks at the African personality, and it talks about what is the African. And in terms of the African personality, he talks about how different it is than the person, Africa, the African personality is different from the concept of Europe, how we think of of personhood in Europe. A lot of this African personality is bound up in terms of how African people or Caribbean people or people of African heritage, how they worship, how they sing, and even in some worship experiences when in the early part of Christendom and so on, you know, rhythm, certain movements, many when you look at how African people or certain people worship revivalist movement and traditions, they move their body, they drum, they in fact in some Caribbean experiences, mainline churches, at one time they were trying to cut out music, cut out drumming, cut out cut out rhythm, when that is bound up in our how we move, how we talk, we even talk rhythmic, how we sing, how we dance, how we live. When you start to study, but then there are some religions today that makes all the African personality and identity obsolete. And some churches, they have actually, I'm not saying that it is wrong if your church is doing it, but I'm just teaching, I'm being true to the lecture here and to history. And of course, some churches cut out music, um, or cut out the use of tools or technology within music. And when we talk about technology, we're not just talking about digital technology, but we're talking about technology, cultural technology. Okay, the the bark of a tree becomes a tool, a cultural tool that can be used to make music, and music was it was has always been part of the human experience. And of course, human beings create music through themselves, or they, of course, human beings who are made in the image of God, according to, we believe that we are made in the image of God with that creative ability. And so human beings are able to do that. But anyways, the African personality, we are always creative. And Kimani Nehusha is from Guyana, and he wrote, and he talks about this African personality. He talks about the idea of the cosmos and the idea of how the African and was one with his universe, with the experience of the world. And then, of course, Ashanti and Diop, the African history of origin. I saw Abrel putting that in the text earlier. And towards the end of this lecture class, the penultimate lecture will be a presentation, a lecture where I will talk about. I've already written the lecture for you guys. It will be a final reflection, putting all of this together. And then the last lecture, I will ask the question: should theology transcend culture? Should culture transcend theology? What are the giveaways? So the last lecture of this course: should theology transcend culture, or the other way around? And the penultimate lecture, I would wrap up talking about what shall we where shall we go with all of this Afrocentricity, Afropolitanism, and cosmopolitanism. But anyways, we begin the when you look. So anyways, we begin the timeline by looking at Kemet and the fact that Africans came to the New World. We've already established that from your readings and from the reflections. And then, of course, we talk about Arawak to Africans. The next timeline from the 1500s to the 1800s. Now, this period represents the historical transition in the Caribbean from the indigenous Arawak population to the arrival and enslavement of Africans during European colonization. And I said to you, because we are now we are rethinking we're rethinking Caribbean thought, we're thinking cultures and so on. Where we won't begin with number two, we'll begin with number one. We're not going to begin as defeatist with a defeatist or oppressive position. So we start with this up with a sophisticated Africa, and then we move to out to where Africans were sailing to the Caribbean, and of course, and by the way, if when you look at African traditions, African sorry, Caribbean, and compare it with the Arawakan tribe and what they have and how they look and how they worship, the similarities are so stark. You cannot deny what what Ivan Van Sertima and many others are saying about the fact that our sailors from Africa were coming to the Caribbean way before Europeans were coming here, and may have remained here and stayed here and became part of the Arawakan indigenous tribe. The Arawakan indigenous people were the original inhabitants of the Caribbean islands before the arrival of the Europeans, or before the Africans. With the establishment of European colonies, the Spanish, English, French, and Dutch, African slaves were brought to the region to work on plantations, leading to significant demographic and cultural changes. The influences in this region include European colonial powers, African cultural heritage, forced labor systems. So it was forced labor systems. In terms of philosophy, the philosophies and ideologies within the 1500s and 1800s, European colonization or European colonialism, racial hierarchy, plantation economies. So it was a period that was marked with sugar plantation, cotton plantation, and so on and so forth. Um, but as I said to you, it's very important to note that many of the Africans that we thought that we hear about, many of them may have very well come from many of the Arawaks were integrated with many of the Africans before now. And I want to and before I said to you that last week's not last week's lecture, the week before last, the title of that lecture was From Africa to Arawak, and and then from that. to African slaves, because the Afri- from the from so the so we're not starting with Arawak to Africans anymore. We're starting with Kemet when we begin the study of Caribbean thought. But of course, as I said to you, what you may ask, what about Eastern cultures and Chinese cultures, which is a small population within the Caribbean, but yet we should still consider their history, their roots, their heritage. Um, that's part of the Caribbean experience, the dynamic experience of the Caribbean, and so we have to then consider them. But as I have said to you, is that there has not been any concerted effort throughout history to deny, to discredit, and to hide Eastern or Chinese or Indian history. They are rich. There has been a concerted effort to hide, to discredit, and to deny African history. One student said, "Sir, I've been watching the videos. What do you mean by?" And the student was cracking up, and the student said, "Sir, and I think she said, Abril said, there's a point I make. Wherever you find black people, there is poverty. Wherever you find, and then if you read the lecture, I told you to watch the lecture last week looking at critical thinking. One of the things I said, critical thinking allows you to ask yourself certain questions that you would not ask if you weren't critically thinking about it. And people will not ask themselves those questions because we are comfortable in our ivory towers or with our position or our power. Institutions will not allow us to ask those questions because it challenges the power base, it challenges the status quo. But those questions are important. They are very important. And so last week you would have watched that video, which is very important for you to begin and start thinking about critical thinking and how critical thinking allow us to ask ourselves certain questions about, say, for example, Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault was a postmodernist who believes that institutions, or who looked at the relationship between knowledge and institutions and believed that institutions exist to protect, to preserve, and to maintain a knowledge that is not normal to nature but has been created to maintain a power base, to maintain privilege, position, and status in society. Critical thinking, that's what part of critical thinking does. Critical thinking is part of epistemological reflection. Critical thinking is part of philosophical reflection, and many of you will do introduction to philosophy. You would have, if you go to JTS. I don't know if they're still doing it now, but when I was at JTS, we did introduction to philosophy, and of course now I understand that they're doing critical thinking. When I was at JTS, we weren't talking about critical thinking, but now they're talking about critical thinking. But critical thinking exists today, but critical thinking has always is part of philosophical reflection. There has been an effort to deny critical reflection, critical thinking, which begins with reading, which begin with access to the truth, with access to information. And the fact that there are those who would actually go as far as to deny access to information suggests the attempt to continue a particular, or to preserve a particular power base at the expense of others through the manipulation of information or through the hoarding of information. Say, for example, It was not until the Reform, during the Dark Ages, when the church was selling indulgences, you understand from that time you could not only certain people could read and write and could understand the scriptures, and if you and any attempt to translate the scriptures or within a common language was heresy. First of all, that makes absolutely no sense. Yet that was what passes as normal. Because, and I have said to the and so and that's what I have said to you. But and then and critical thinking is important. And this is from if you watched the class last week, we talk about what is the symbiotic relationship between offense and colonization. Because when you and of course and within that reflection, we talk about that symbiotic relationship. In fact, since you guys are here, let's 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 bring it up. Uh, how many of you watched the class last week? Sorry, how many of you watched the video the video I'd asked you guys to watch? That's fine. You can come by. It's fine. How many of you watched the video last
So I
week?
watched most of it, not all.
From lecture for it was long. I know it was a long video. It's like 3 hours. Um, it was rather long, so I apologize about that. Let me see if I could find it. The symbiotic relationship between. And I asked the question: when you study society, what it is that you must do what do you ask? What question do you ask when you study society? What question do you ask? You can come through. That's fine. What question do you ask? Ask in whose interest? So you said you watch it. In whose interest is the society created? For whom? For where? For what? For whom? For where? For what? In whose interest? You ask those questions, and I said to you, what is the Caribbean? The Caribbean is a dependent capitalist society whose society has been transformed or created or invented into a dependency. The plan was by the power brokers was that the Caribbean and the satellite countries within the Caribbean and former colonized countries was always to occupy a position of dependency and lack. And whenever they seem to outduel the former master, that's a problem. Whether through force or through CIA or whatever, there is always a way to re-penetrate, to re-establish their dominance. That's what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine. That's what's going on in the US today, as we say that the US is in decline, their dominance, their power, the white race is in decline. And so there is always what is known as a backlash. What is a backlash? A backlash is a response. That word is important. It's a response by the status quo. It's a response by the norm, by people, by okay, a response. Jamaica is doing well, that's a problem for the superpower. Ukraine, Poland doing well, that's a problem for Russia. But we say that colonialism at its core was rooted in the violence of theft. Again, colonialism at its core was rooted in the violence of theft, a group seizing another's land and then erecting border fencing to safeguard their ill-gotten property. That's what happened in the Caribbean. That's what happened with South Africa. That's what's going on with the Gaza. That's what happened in the US and in Brazil with the American, and then of course after they came in and they cornered off a place for themselves. A group seizing another's land and then erecting border fencing to safeguard their ill-gotten property. The concept of fences, as we understand them today, emerged just as colonization was commencing, intertwining the two in a complex historical narrative. The term fence in Middle English literally means defense, with its evolved meaning of surrounding with a fence. When you look at serfdom and how the serf and how they would go onto these people's land, stole their property, turn around, erect fences, and then pay them pittance to come back and work the land. Karl Marx talks about that in Das Kapital. Reference that. The period coincide with in the 1500s, coincide with the onset of modern colonialism, marked by European discoveries of sea routes around Africa's southern coast between 1488 and America in 1492. The concept of fence in the Middle English literally meant defense. The word evolved. It's that evolved meaning of surrounding with a fence date back to the 1500s, coinciding with the onset of modern colonialism marked by European discoveries. The Americas, once inhabited by American Indians and Amerindians, these indigenous peoples, often nomadic, traversed the continent's coastlines, adapting to the varying fertility of the land dictated by climate changes. Lacking the technology for permanent structures like fences, they embarked on a nomadic lifestyle. So if you were to ask me, when you look at this society of the Africans, it almost resembled that of the society of the American Indians here. I'm telling you there, when you look at the relationship and the society. But anyways, that's the point I'm trying to make. But when you look at their lifestyle, their personality, and by the way, I forgot. I need to share a book with you. I did a book review of a book of Edward Blyton. Edward Blyton, very powerful, and he talks about the personality and personality of the races, and it's very powerful. And he talks about the African and their personality to be bucolic, very agricultural, sharing. They're not competitive. The Europeans, white people, according to Edward Blyden, are very competitive. They have a very competitive spirit. Kimani Nahushi talks about the personality of the African as against the personality of the European. The European or the white man or the Anglo-Saxon is competitive. And so he has a capitalist framework, a capitalist political culture. He's always advocating for capital structure. While that of the African or African societies or those societies, that was always one that was communal, that was nomadic. And by nomadic is not necessarily, it means they would go and the kind of society was a society where there was a seasonal one. When the season changes, their location change. Where they get food change. There is no fence. It's open. It's alive. They are peoples. They travel in groups, they travel in peoples, but they were one. They never went somewhere, tried to find the best, cornered it off for themselves, and then tried to make a profit off it. But of course, historically, society before that society was never based on currency, where you okay and profit that involved profit and greed. That was invented. Capitalism was created within a communalist milieu. Sorry, a capitalist. Sorry, a European milieu. I heard them talking on CNN, or the political pundits were talking recently, saying across in the world, Christianity is up 67%. 67%. The most in a long, it's been a while that Christianity has been up. But then when they delve into the numbers, and as academics, you want to delve into the numbers. You don't just look at numbers and move on. Let's look at the numbers. They delve into the numbers. Majority of those who say they're Christian today, when you look at them today, majority of those who are Christian who say they're Christian, majority of them don't believe or do not practice institutionalized religion or Christianity. So the way in which people are practicing Christianity today has evolved. But that is part of human beings and how human beings change over time as they go from place to place. The seasons change them. Their their proximity to the earth, their proximity to the animals, they affect their spirituality, so on and so forth. But anyways, we're learning that more and more people are now are moving away from institute, and then the studies by the Pew Research shows that more people who consider themselves Christians are conservatives or practice a kind of conservative politics. And of course, within the Caribbean, throughout the Caribbean is highly conservative, especially with the European culture, European theology, and so on and so forth. They anyways, majority of Christians are conservative, and most of them usually vote a certain way in the US, a certain way in the Caribbean. However, most atheists, or those who are non-Christians or whatever, they agnostics and so on, they're usually liberal. And they have liberal policies that promote social welfare, and most Christians who are conservative promote policies that are anti-social welfare. Isn't that interesting? Policies that promote, say for example, conservative care, so on and so forth. Women's health and so on and so forth. They don't. You wouldn't find that in certain places. It's quite interesting. But anyway, moving right along, we're talking about the idea of critical thinking and what pertains in the last week class, and how it's important to think critically, and how thinking critically has helped us to arrive at some of the truths that we have. And while as we learn about critical thinking, we are learning and unpacking our history and the approach to history that has been bastardized and corrupted. The Americans, once inhabited by ancient Indians and Amerindians, these indigenous people, often nomadic, traversed the continent coastlines, adapting to the varying fertility of the land dictated by climate changes. Lacking the technology of permanent structures like fences, they embraced a nomadic lifestyle. Then came the European colonizers, the foreigner thief. Then came the European colonizers, the foreigner thief. I call them the foreigner thief. Around 1500, dominating the Americas and restricting the nomadic movement of indigenous people. The Europeans, having claimed the land, began erecting fences, physical and metaphorical, to demarcate and protect their acquisitions. Isn't that interesting? They go in, build fence, and then build fence around it, and it's now theirs. Is it, you find that the need to build fences is the historically colonization, which which also involved the need to build fences, was necessary to prevent the attack from the victims of theft. But you don't see them as victims of theft. You saw them as slaves, as primitives as nobody, to justify their theft so that they can wear their shirt and their tie and look pretty, whatever the case is. Simplistically put, this shift from a free land of nomadic people to a landscape divided by borders represents a pivotal moment in history. By the way, one time I heard that, oh, black people don't write. Yes, black people don't write. The black people, and I said, what is the problem with race, and the problem in the Western society is that they have turned a whole group of Africans into black people. And what does black symbolize is within the logic of the white world or the Western society. This is the logic. The first premise, the second premise, and the final conclusion. This is the first premise. Nothing black, no good. Second premise, Africans or people of African heritage are black. This is the final, this is the conclusion from first premise and second premise. This is the final conclusion. Therefore, Africans, no good. That is a logical statement there. That you let me let that percolate. Let me let that percolate. That is a logical statement, you know. Do you know that if you guys study this is not a philosophy class, but it's Caribbean thought, but it involves reflecting on Caribbean philosophy, Caribbean theology, okay, Caribbean sociology, Caribbean psychology, Caribbean anthropology, a kind of reflection that promotes Caribbean identity, Caribbean prowess in the world. We need a course like this. The point I made was a very profound point because it is a point that is couched in logic. It is a point couched in logic. And if you study logic, and then you would understand, and you understand the idea of the inductive method of arriving at truth and the deductive method of arriving at truth. But sometimes these very same methods, but I said, but you cannot rely on the deductive and the inductive method. You cannot rely on these logics to arrive at truth, because that very same logic will leave you dumbfounded. The problem of racial injustice, the problem of discrimination, the problem where Caribbean people who are part of the global south, who occupy part of the bottom rung of society, where we have dependent capitalist society, stems from a history that we must understand, a history we must understand that history if we are ever to navigate our invented position. If you were to read the Caribbean Reader, That's what, and I agree with the Caribbean as an invention, because the Caribbean we have is not the Caribbean. If you look at the Caribbean today, some students didn't. I disagree that the Caribbean is not an invention. The Caribbean is not an invention, but the Caribbean is an invention in the sense that the Caribbean that we see today, would it have existed in the way it is today if the European did not colonize the Caribbean? No. Take the descendants of ancient Indians whose ancestors. So we talk about, yeah, so I'm saying to you, we talk about the idea of epistemology, which is a branch of philosophy that looks at how do you attain knowledge? How do you attain knowledge? How do you arrive at truth? What logic? What is your logic? And then they say, well, of course, it is logical that Africans are not good. Africans aren't the smartest people in the world. Caribbean people aren't the smartest people in the world. They come from an African heritage or mix up with it. They're not the smartest people in the world. They're not the brightest people in the world. That's an ethnocentrist position, of course. And I use they, and you might say, who is they? Who? Oh my God, who is they? Listen, who is Professor talking about? And because I'm going to make the point that they would use logic, common sense, and reason to make that determination. The Western world that we find ourselves, the power brokers of society, the status quo, and later on, I won't define neoliberalism today and get into that. I'll get into it later on, and it becomes a deeper concept. So I won't delve into it. However, I will define the dominant class. Who is the dominant class? The financial class or the capitalists? Who are okay? What's the dominant class? Okay, or we talk about the elitists. We talk about they have the elitist, those who occupy elitist position in society through a history of violence, a history of corruption. Karl Marx in Das Kapital 1, 2, and 3 talks about that. The book that I have written, Neoliberal Globalization, Reconsidered, Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nation, is a play upon words. It's a pun. It's a play upon words. It's a play upon Adam Smith's book. Adam Smith wrote the book Capitalism and the Death of Nations. And in that book, he talks about when you study Western capitalist society, no, sorry, it's Adam Smith wrote Capitalism and the Wealth of Nations, showing how capitalist societies create wealth through hard work and then of course Max Weber talks about Weber, the Protestant ethic, capital, and the Protestant ethic, talking about how capitalism or capitalist society utilized Protestant ethic. It was the Protestant ethic that is contained, or the spiritual ethic or the religious ethic that is contained within Western societies, capitalist societies, has resulted in how they work, how they organize into how production is organized, and the reason for how their mass production, mass output, and their wealth. That Karl Marx said, absolutely not. That is not why these rich countries are rich. These rich countries are rich because of theft. If you have time, you can read Karl Marx, that's Capital, because of theft. And he talks about the conflict within the history of society has marked a history of conflict. And of course, my dissertation looks at the history of societies within Western civilization has always been about privilege and status from reading the Iliad and all the way up. So we talk about colonization being the depersonalization, according to Frantz Fanon, it's the depersonalization of the human, of the person. I said to you, power works like this. It redefines a thing. It redefines the thing. It strips you of your identity, of your personhood, of the reality of you. You are not human. You are not a thinker. You don't have religion, or you don't, or you're not, or you don't have spirituality, because back then in the 1500s, before the Renaissance and the Reformation, before the Enlightenment period, religion occupied a central aspect in almost every single civilization and society. And so, with this ideological framework, well, sorry, I almost missed my train of thought. But this is the point I'm making. Every society had religion, or at least before and if you were irreligious, if you question the declarations of the church, the religious institutions, or the practice, not necessarily in Africa, but everywhere else, that is a problem. You'll be burnt at the stake, or whatever the case is. And so, what you find is that the African was never said to be religious, was never said to be human. And so, when I was at Georgetown, I was in a transatlantic history class, and the professor asked, and I asked the question, why is it, and I'm showing my screen, sorry, but why is it that why is it that a people, Europeans who are said to be religious, promoted Christian civility, worship, and love? How is it that they could treat such people with such indignity? And of course, the power brokers of the day had to answer to the church, had to answer. And so, as I review, as I read history and studied the archives, and as we had these powerful discussions in the transatlantic history classes, one of the things that we learned is that many of the justification The justification was Africans aren't real people. They don't have religion. And saying, okay, oh, you know, they're not real. They don't have religion. They're primitive. They don't have family. Redefine. Okay, and oh, and not only that, and of course, that was the justification in order to justify their consciences and the challenge from good men. The idea of slavery came about in the 1600s, and I have a lecture to talk about that, and I wasn't going to talk about the idea of sorry, not slavery, race as a concept. Um, race has race was never there was never idea of race. When we talk about Africa, the idea of Africa or the Kemeticians. The Kemeticians weren't black people. They weren't white people. They weren't pink people. They weren't mulattoes. They were just the Kemeticians. When you think of the world historically, prior to the 1800s, to the 1500s, there was no idea of black or white or race. Race is a Western concept that was developed in the 1500s, and I will share with you later on who developed the idea of race, and remind me to share with you and I wrote an article about that. Remind me to share that with you later on. It's going to be also part of the second book that I'm about to publish, which is not yet available. But the concept of race came about in the 1500s. It was never accepted in academia as acceptable knowledge because, you know, there are standards. There are always gatekeepers. I tell you, Michel Foucault, Michel, Foucault, I don't, it's French, Fouccault. I think that's how it's spelled. You can check it out, Michel Foucault. Um, one of my favorite guys, although he's not from the Caribbean or African. People like Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre is important. The lecture that I have for today includes talking about Jean-Paul Sartre. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to the script that I actually have prepared for you to do today. I'm going off script, but it's very important, the conversation I'm having with you. By the way, as I said to you, if you have not completed the reflection paper, try and get some time to finish it, and so on and so forth. The grade, once you submit the paper, you get full marks for the reflection paper. But I'm not giving you but right now, if you're not finished, don't worry about it. Focus on the group work, okay? As I said to you, the way this class is, if I could give you guys all A's, I would. But the way how this course is structured, whether even if you get 100% in this class, in the regular class, at the end of the day, if you get 50%, 60% in the exam, you will still fail, okay? And that's how it is. I'm sorry about that. So my job is I just want you to be engaged with the materials and so on, and follow the concepts here. Very important. But let's continue with what I'm saying and where I'm going with this. The Europeans, Christina, I see you. In 5 minutes, I will respond. The Europeans, so slavery in the 1500s, and I've written about this. But this slavery was. The Europeans are said to be people who are civil, sophisticated, religious. Embrace a religion of social welfare and love and kind. But they have enslaved a whole set of people. How do they justify that? How do they wipe their consciences clean? Just as how Ignatius, in the first 100 years of Christianity, gave the church a Roman, sorry, gave the followers of Christ a Roman identity so as to gain acceptance and prominence. And then the Caesar, or who saw, who realized that, well, wait, if I become friends with this group and so on, then my station will rise and so on. We'll talk more. But the church, the Roman Catholic Church was not always, okay, that was before the Roman Catholic Church. The church, there was no structure to the church or to the followers of Christ. There was no structure. Worship was free. Just as our living was nomadic and free, worship was free. But they created a Roman identity to the church in the first 100 years of Christianity in order to protect the church, to preserve it. Not only that, there was also fierce rivalry. The church and Judaism, and in fact, in the early part of Christianity, there was no difference between Christians and Jews, except Jews for Jesus and Jews not for Jesus. But to everybody else, they were seen to be of one. But Jesus came to bring Jesus came to bring the Jews for Jesus, Jews for Jesus over to their side. Because in order for you to be a Jew, you have to be circumcised. In order for you to be a Jew, you have to be born into the born a Jew. But Jesus said, no, I'm here to change that. Okay. All right. Because they need religion. And if you don't have religion and so on, then uh, you don't occupy a position in society, in a sense. So therefore, here we go. So here it is that according to the historical records here, Jesus now then said, according to within Judaism, when somebody marries into a family, then they take on that family. They become one with that family. No, they become a part. You become part of the family. Become part of the identity. Jesus said, okay, no, why are you questioning these people? They are followers of me. They are now my people. So because they follow me, and in other words, they follow me and they are one with me, then by virtue of that, our religion says that we can embrace them into our faith. And of course, over time, there was still fierce rivalry because Jesus was seen to be a radical. Here it is, he comes on the scene and saying, hey, no, they don't have to do all that you are saying that they must do in order for them to become part of the Jewish fold or to become part of the faith. In order for that, and they have to do X, Y, and Z. And Jesus said, no, they don't have to do that. If part of the understanding of our faith, of our tradition, is that if you have someone and they become married into that faith based on virtue of that person, then they become part of the faith, become part of the preeminence of the Jewish faith, because this is the faith that they must all follow. But anyways, whatever the case is, over time the church became Gentiles the Gentiles who followed Jesus created their own institutions, their own faith, and gave it a Roman identity. And created an institution and embellished its doctrinal positions in order to strengthen its position over everything else. Edward Blyden said that the white man, the Anglo-Saxon European, they are driven by this competitive nature, this competitive spirit, even within their religiosity and their spirit, and if they have a spirituality. But although many people believe that the spirituality came from that African experience, which as Europeans travel and came to understand African religiosity became embellished. Sorry, spirituality became embellished and morphed into into a kind of religiosity, and where they don't, and the part of the aspect of the African tradition that was not embraced or accepted within Eurocentric ideology or religion was discarded as dark, voodoo, obia, dark, evil. Somebody asked me last week, 2 weeks ago, so you're a pastor, you believe in praying for the dead? And I'm saying to you, well, please remember, when you think about Christianity today, Christianity is not one. Christianity is a denomination. You have many different denominations within Christianity. There's Roman Catholicism, and if you are Roman Catholic, and you might have some Roman Catholics do come to JTS, and if you're a Roman Catholic, you believe in purgatory, and you believe in praying, and you believe that when people die, they go to the dead, depending on whatever. There are those who believe that. That was not always part of the Christian faith. And there are those who still today who have denied that. And there are those who believe that it's always been part of the Christian faith. Or throughout history, Christianity have embellished other faiths. But I'm talking about the strategy to gain preeminence, the strategy to gain preeminence and to maintain privilege and position in the world today, and how that has always been part of society. And I say to you, slavery was developed about in about 1500, just about race. But uh, race was not always a theory that was accepted. It was not accepted. It was seen as a theory, and that's it. That was placed and rejected and placed at the backwaters of academia until until the justification was needed to appease these merchants, these businessmen, the business class, this supremacist class, to appease their souls, who call themselves godmen, to appease their souls and that of their men and their church leaders, and so to appease them. Revive the idea, revive this theory, revived this theory, or baptized it and blessed it. And it became part of academia and part of the knowledge of the day. And use that same theory that was rejected, now accepted, to justify why they can enslave a whole people and treat them like property. Justify their faith, or satisfy their faith, and the question that their faith will ask. I said that, and I said to you, when you look at colonization, when you look at power, when you look at power and colonization, they're part of the same thing. When you look at how power is maintained and how power is established, and colonization, Frantz Fanon talked about it being the depersonalization of a thing, of a person. So Africans weren't people. Africans and their descendants weren't people. Once you remember, nothing black, no good. Africans are black, so therefore all Africans no good, and their descendants, and anything that's brushed with black, like the okay, no good. That is the logic. That is the okay. That is part of redefine a thing. They are simpletons. They don't have religion, based on a value judgment Based on, and of course we say, well, that's being ethnocentric. You're using your own values, but no, that's not entirely true. It is based on an ethnocentrist position where they're using their own values about what they believe is right and wrong to judge other persons and to talk about who they are and what they are not. But no, it was a strategy as well, a strategy to assert their dominance and to control the other by redefining a human as something, as an inanimate object. Anything that stems any Afri- Africans and their descendants are not good is based on a logical argument. Well, if that is logic, then something is wrong with logic. Yes. So how much can we trust logic if we have a logic that has been created to exceptionalize others and to demean some, and to protect their theft? Because they are dogs, they're not human beings, so we can take from them. Take the descendants of ancient Indians whose ancestors embraced nomadism. Nomadism. The impact of colonization persists as they too migrate in large numbers to the United States. The colonial legacy, marked by stolen land and fenced boundaries, influences the dynamics of movement and settlement in the Americas. In closing, exploring the historical convergence of fences and colonialism unveils a compelling narrative of theft, dominance, and the enduring repercussions on indigenous communities. Understanding these parallels enriches our perspectives on the intricate interplay between cultural practices, land ownership, and the lasting effects of colonial legacies and the challenge of border security. So the question that we are considering here is, what does a fence have in common with colonialism, or what, stemming from the idea of theft and how theft is justified. How theft is justified. One more point as I take questions. Where am I? Um, we're looking at the Caribbean thought timeline. So we look at Arawaks to Africans, and
Sir,
then
good evening. Just a minute. I had my hand raised for the
go ahead.
longest while.
Go ahead.
Jenny Simpson, she don't have any internet, so she may be late. She's trying to get some service to join the class.
All right. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
Okay.
Any? Somebody else had their hand up. Who was that? All right. By the way, when we're looking at list currents that have come to shape Caribbean, all of this came because I was talking about. If you guys watched the class last week, I talked about colonialism. Um, the lecture that was for last week, which was recorded, and I asked you to watch it. From a previous class that I did, which deals with some of the issues here. And some of the persons you need to contend with, we will contend with. Some of the is Descartes from 1596 to 1650. If you and when you look at Descartes, Rene Descartes was a French philosopher. He was a mathematician. He was a scientist known as the father of modern philosophy. Um, his influences ancient Greek philosophy, mathematics, scientific revolution. Descartes was the person who coined cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Cartesian phenomenology has also helped to inform critical thinking and skeptics. And that's what we are. And I said, as post-colonialists, we have to be skeptics. We have to be skeptics. We're skeptical of our history because of what we have to contend with today. Take the history of reparation. Take, take the history of reparation. People talk about reparation. Oh, no, no, no. I mean, why do we talk about reparation? When you look at, say, for example, the English-speaking Caribbean, in 1855, I apologize. In 1833, we got independence. The English-speaking Caribbean got independence. In 1833. That was when slavery was abolished. But slavery was abolished in 1833 in the English-speaking Caribbean. But the Africans never left the plantation until about what? 1864, 1865. Almost 30 years. 30 years. 30 years that you had these slaves working on the plantation, the sugar plantation, from 1833 to 1865. The question is, were they compensated? It wasn't until 1865 that they got the Emancipation Proclamation was read. 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation was read. But they got independence from 1833. So the question is, what happened to, were the slaves paid? If that means they were working as for 30 years. In fact, people died working on the plantation as freed men, and they didn't know about it, and women, and they didn't know. They didn't know about it. Anyways, I don't know why I get to talk. I'm talking about the fact that the importance of critical thinking and how 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 people like Descartes has helped to facilitate this critical thinking. But the fact that and I said to you, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. We're going to talk about critical thinking in a second, but I wanted to underscore the point of how through critical thinking we are able to arrive at certain truths that we would not have arrived at, and it is critical thinking is not promoted within a kind of culture that continues to protect ill-gotten gains and to discriminate and to exceptionalize themselves over others. So when you look at, so of course it's important for you to consider that if, so there were slaves were freed, but they were still working until 1865. Until 1865. Were they compensated? No, they were not compensated. Who was compensated? And I'm going to tell you who was compensated. I wrote an article. If I could find the article, Um, I'm gonna. Where is that article called? It's called uh, "Un Unpaid Slavery." Sorry about that, guys. Unpaid slavery. I'm sorry about that. Let me find the name of the book. I wrote an article entitled "Unpaid Freedom: Unveiling the Unsettling Legacy of West Indies Slavery." And in the article, I said, which was part of a lecture, the abolition of slavery in the West Indies in 1833 marked a significant milestone in the fight against human bondage. Again, the abolition of slavery in the West Indies in 1833 marked a significant milestone, marked a significant milestone. I'm sorry, I'm going to share my screen here. Marked a significant milestone in the fight against human bondage. However, the news of emancipation did not reach the slaves. The news of emancipation did not reach the slaves until 1865. The title of this is Unpaid Freedom, Unveiling the Unsettling Legacy of West Indies Slavery. You know, we, well, you will be visited with stories, philosophical reflections, and ideas that shows how throughout history, Black and brown people, African people, or people of African heritage, have been marred by challenge after the other, where they have been penetrated, where they have been penetrated and pushed against the wall. The idea of penetration is important. However, the news of emancipation did not reach the enslaved population until 1865, leaving them to toil as free laborers for over 3 decades without emancipation. This essay delves into the profound injustice endured by these individuals and examines the question of why their emancipation went unrecognized for so long. Furthermore, it explores the implication of this delayed freedom, the potential for lost wages and forced labor, and the need for compensation and remuneration for their toil. Between 1833 and 1865, blacks, I should not use the word blacks, I apologize, African people, I will edit it later on, I working as slaves on plantations in the West Indies were technically freed, but they were unaware of their emancipation for over 32 years. This startling revelation raises crucial questions about the responsibility of plantation owners, the government, and the dominant class in compensating these individuals for their labor during this extended period. While the insurance claims made by plantation owners against the loss of property due to the abolition of slavery were honored, the compensation owed to the workers themselves was neglected. This is part of the reflection in history that we do here in Caribbean thought. When you look at the timeline that I showed you, and if you go on at the timeline in Caribbean thought, the period between 1833 to 1865 is something important. It's a timeline that helps to justify what many people believe that, oh no, we can't play people. There is no way we can compensate black and brown people for their for their loss. I said to you, part of the problem is that they have made African people and their descendants into black people. And I have presented and I have presented and discussed with you a logic that within a philosoph within Western philosophical reflections, that even through logic suggest the problem. They have where logic have been used to demonstrate the nothing goodness. I apologize for using that word. The nothing goodness. The nothing goodness, nothing black no goodness of the African. How through logic. And even after black and brown people throughout the Caribbean got their independence in the 1800s, sorry, in 1833, they were not free in the eyes of their masters and in the eyes of themselves. First of all, they were not free when they were free because they weren't told that they were free because of a plot, a strategy to get them to still work while they work on a strategy to fill the lost gap, the lost labor. To find we free them, but who is going to work the land? And who and of course, and we are gonna need to get compensation. If these people were really people who were being freed, why is it that plantation owners were being paid insurance money for the loss of property? As if these slaves were horses if they are freed. No, but it's as if they were freeing the animals to their death. You know, when animals work, when an animal, a cow, whatever, a farmland animal or a racehorse, when they have finished working and they can't work anymore, they send them away to their death. And when black and brown people got independence, it wasn't a celebration of the of how human beings have or the white man have suddenly changed and met Jesus because he always had salvation. But no, it was cheaper to have freed men work for them than to continue with slavery. Plus, there was all the losses from the attacks, all the losses from the attacks, the heroic efforts, the voodoo and the obia. They couldn't stand it anymore. They decided to do something else. But of course, the economics was changing. The way we're talking about capitalism was the way we think about work. And people started, and then Adam Smith and so on, we started apply science, the scientific applications in terms of production, in terms of work, applying specialization and division of labor and changing the way we see work. So the need, and not only that, the invention of technologies and so on, the need for slave labor is no longer necessary. So the end of slavery wasn't a victory for black people or people of African descent to celebrate, really, to celebrate as the vicissitude of men who have gone wild, who now embrace Jesus, who always had Jesus, though, who used that same Bible to justify slavery. It was expedient. It was look what Donald Trump is doing with NAFTA. And by the way, did you guys read my article about NAFTA? And by the way, what I said I was going to start with class today talking about what's going on in the world today with Donald Trump because it affects Jamaica, what's going on with Panama. And it seems as if Donald Trump is going to have his way in terms of Panama and taking control of that area. Next is Jamaica. I'm just kidding. And Jamaicans helped to build Panama. What is the Caribbean saying about Panama? And these two superpowers jostling over Panama. But slavery, but anyway, the point I'm making is so slavery was abolished, but yet it wasn't the slaves that were free. The abolishment of slavery wasn't tantamount to the freedom of men. Because because economically, politically, spiritually, the slaves were still held in bondage. Their identity, their language, the abolishment of slavery does not represent the freedom of men. The abolishment of slavery represents the abolishment of slave labor or labor. The abolishment of slavery was the end of a particular kind of economic activity, the end of work, a kind of work, the end of an industry. Say, for example, when you think about layoff, what is layoffs? You lay off workers because a job or a role has become redundant. But it's also a strategy. You get rid of the position, the person who occupies the position is no longer necessary. That's the idea of layoffs. That's the idea of redundancy. Slaves were redundant. Their labor was redundant. So they were laid off because the position was no longer necessary. Slave labor was a position within the plantocracy. Slave labor, slavery was a position but it was what position? It was tantamount to that of cattle labor. But that kind of labor became redundant to a new kind of labor. As the world changed, as economic production became more sophisticated, not only that, it was more expensive. It's cheaper to have these slaves work and you pay them a pittance. You no longer have to give them a place to live. You no longer have to take care of their needs. You no longer have to give them food. Now they have to take care of, they have to find place to live. They have to find food. They have to look after their health care and all of that. And so now they have to get a job. And as the world as the world moved towards a consumer society, it was best to create all the slaves that was growing in terms of size in population, turn them into a consumer society, community, where now they get to buy and contribute. But at the end of the day, what can they buy with what they have? Because they're getting pittance. And that's when by the 1930s and 40s and 50s, we start talking about social welfare and so on and so forth. But that we still don't have social welfare in Jamaica. We have it in Barbados. We have it a little bit in Jamaica, but it's not as elaborate and sophisticated. More work needs to be done. Very important point I'm making here. So slavery, the end of slavery wasn't a victory for African men and women. It was just the end of a kind of work. It was costing the the capitalist too much money. And capitalism is about making money. And later on, when you start to study the history of society, now we talk about the transnationalism and multinationalism, and okay, cheap labor, companies trying to find cheap labor. Of course, you're producing Mexico, you're producing Turkey, you're producing in an sweatshop conditions in these areas, benefit from low wages, and they send the goods back to the US and they pay them $1 or $2.50, like what they pay them in Jamaica. They pay in Jamaica, that's what they're paying them in the call centers. Average, they get $3.50 US dollars, $3.50. Okay, and that's supposed to be fine. That's supposed to be enough. So if $3.50 US can't do anything. But anyways, so when you think about the history of man, so let's continue with the idea here. So they were free, but they were free, but no, their labor was free. But economically, they were desperate and destitute. And later on, we will see wherever they try to do well, wherever it seemed as if black people, African people, or or their ancestors were doing well, there is always a backlash, economically, politically, strategically. Look what happened in Haiti. What they did, create debt. Ramesh Wansawan, who wrote the book, who wrote the book, the challenge of structural adjustment in the Commonwealth Caribbean. He's from Trinidad, from the University of West Indies. Powerful book. He said that the structural adjustment issue is not surprisingly one surrounded by intense controversy and emotion. This is because it does not concern simply with economic policies or improving government performance, but brings into question basic economic philosophy and ideology, and may also involve the effective transfer of decision making from local hands. Structural adjustment. And my book, Neoliberalism, if you want to learn about structural adjustment, the best book to learn about structural adjustment is your textbook written by your professor. I talk about it to the T. So if you're hearing the word structural adjustment for the very first time, that's a problem. It means you're not reading. You're not delving into the course. Structural adjustment is in your, I talk about it it's in the book, it's in your textbook. But structural adjustment is one of the tools, one of the ways that the post-industrial, the global north, the dominant class, in the history of the world, where men have dominated and ruled other men, they have used various strategies. Creating debt was one. Haiti got freedom, but they created a debt so that they can remain dependent and controllable. The Jamaica and the Caribbean, same thing. The slaves were freed in 1833, but guess what? They didn't even know that they were freed until 1865. And after they were told that they were freed and left, they got no money and nothing. They left, and they had nothing. It goes to show the indomitable spirit of the African. The fact that when they learned that they were free, they dropped their tools and left the plantation. But guess what? The Africans still exist today. And they represent, black and brown people represent the dominant race within the Caribbean. How were they able to survive? Let me tell you, by 1865, there was a concern among the plantocracy the plantocracy, the people in the Caribbean that controlled the mulattoes and some of the not so bright white people, that the plantocracy in the post-industrial or the colonial countries had left in charge of the Caribbean. The plantocracy there in the Caribbean. They had already put in place a strategy from the 1850s to get the Chinese and the Indians, the indentured laborers from China and India, to come to the Caribbean. So that's why you have certain parts of the Caribbean, Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, various parts of it, you find a heavy concentration. In Trinidad, it's a 50 or 49-50 or 50-50 in terms of Indians and Africans. And in Jamaica, you have a large amount, you have more Chinese, and in most places in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, the Chinese. In the 1850s, the Indians and the Chinese started coming here as indentured laborers to work the sugar plantation because the Africans who were working on the plantation by then were freed, and they didn't know that, but they started bringing them here slowly, so that by the time the announcement was made in 1865, they were ready for it. But you know who wasn't ready for it? The African people. But they weren't real people. Remember, they weren't real people. If they were truly free in 1833 and abolished by 1865, then they would have been given insurance money. They would have been given benefits. They would have been given protections. They would have been compensated. But they were given nothing. It means, so why are we celebrating freedom in 1865? There was no freedom. African people have never celebrated freedom. What they celebrated was the abolishment of their labor. What Africans celebrate was the abolishment of their labor, the redundancy of their jobs. But if they truly were free people, they should have been accorded all the benefits of being free people when you lose your job after years of working. They never got retirement, they never got pension, they never got insurance. Continuing the narrative of nothing black no good. Using logic. You can't say them talking nonsense. You can't say them talk nonsense because them are use logic. Them are use logic. Them are use logic. Professor, what students say, sir, you're so passionate. Yes, I am passionate about this course. Because it unearths things about ourselves that we don't know, that we would not have known. It challenges ourselves. It exposes us so that we can be better persons. Let that percolate. There are many ways. Okay, so there comes the abolishment of slavery in 1865 across the English-speaking Caribbean. And insurance claims were made by plantation owners. Did the African slave make any did they make any claim? They don't even know what insurance claim is back then, because if they knew, maybe they would have done that. Oh, I am free, that means I can put in a claim. But they never put in a claim, and the church did not show them how to do it. They never had agency. The church was fighting for the abolishment of slavery, but the church and those who said that they were providing agency didn't help them to get any money. They gave them freedom, but that was it. I mean, sorry, they free. No, I apologize. They made their labor redundant, but they were not told that they could file a claim. So today, when we think about reparation, there is strong. If you don't believe in reparation before, you believe it now. If there is no evidence of it, then we have. Of course, there is evidence between 1833 and 1865. We know for that Africans in the English-speaking Caribbean were working while they were free, and by the time they were freed, when they left, they were never compensated. Part of reclaiming African dignity, part of this Pan-African goal of unity is also prosperity, economic prosperity. But there will never be economic prosperity within the Caribbean and a world that has denied, discredited, rejected African people's work and their wealth, and have created a society that ensure that they maintain their station in the world. And whenever you find black and brown people working to make a difference in the world, like Black Wall Street in 1921, they erect a railroad in America and in the Caribbean as a whole. And by the way, people in the Caribbean might say, well, why is Sir talking about black people in America? That doesn't affect us. We don't have those problems. Yes, we do. Who was it? Martin Oppenheimer, who wrote the book with me, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, and we talk about neoliberalism. We talk about the ghettos, the dark ghettos, and who else talk about the dark ghettos? Who else talked about the dark ghettos? You know who talk about the dark ghettos. If you watch JTS online and you watch my introduction, and I talk about Kenneth Clark, and he talks about the dilemmas of social power by Kenneth Clark, and what does Kenneth Clark talk about in the dilemmas of good, and what does Martin Oppenheimer talks about in the state of modern society? What does he talk about? He says, if you are the societies, the communities, the ghettos in the US resembled the ghetto of the Caribbean. He talks about internal colonies. What are internal colonies? Internal colonies are the Philadelphias, the Delawares, the Detroits. Internal colonies. So the Caribbean was a colony, and in a sense it still is, because colony represents control. A colony is a place that is heavily surveilled, a place that is heavily penetrated, a place that is where power is external to the group. Colony, there is lack within a colony. So when you look at the ghetto, the inner city in the US, in Philadelphia, what it is that defines the ghetto, what it is defines the inner city. Many Jamaicans think that, oh, we are better than some Americans, black people, we're better than some of them, we're different. No, as a whole, Jamaica and the Caribbean, the global south, as a whole, they are demeaned. They are dependent. And whenever they seem as if they are going to do well, people like, what do they do? They do like what Trump is doing now. They do like what Russia is doing to Poland now. Ukraine was supposed to be independent, but they weren't supposed to rival Russia's wealth. Haiti was supposed to be independent, but it wasn't supposed to rival France's wealth. All these countries were supposed to be independent, but their independence was relative. They were supposed to get independence in the eyes of the masters. Okay? Togo in Africa, the Epipayo was assassinated by the French or the Belgian because he wanted in the 80s, he just like how Walter Rodney was assassinated by the American operatives in Guyana because they wanted to create a society that was far removed from the society of the former colonial masters, and that was the problem. They wanted to create a religion, a church, or whatever that was far removed from Eurocentrism. And that's a problem. And so what do? They slap debt. Jamaica must not do very well. If Jamaica become like Singapore, that's a problem. I'm telling you that. That's a problem. I wrote the other day that, by the way, I wrote that the US must expand NAFTA to include all the American countries, all the countries in the Americas. So you have an American free trade agreement instead of the North American free trade agreement, because it will now create competition within the region. It will bring about, it will improve, it will relationship within the region, but it will also stymie, minimize, and mitigate China's influence in the region. Because right now, NAFTA, that economic bloc, is Mexico, Canada, and the US. They benefit from trade agreement that other countries in the region cannot benefit. But if they're opening it up to like Jamaica and so on, then all of us can get involved and we can all do well together and make the American nations strong. But where's the political will to do that?
Sir, quick question when you're through.
NAFTA was created to serve the interest of those three countries that were closely together. But what happened? Mexico started to do well. Mexico is doing well. Mexico is not a developing country anymore. Mexico is not even Mexico is making cars. Mexico is slowly coming into the first world. Yes, they have poverty and income inequality, but you find that it's happening where in today's society where rich people are becoming richer and richer, poor people, or the income inequality is widening. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening. The gap between the global south countries and the global north countries, in other words, the post-industrial countries. And by the way, if I ask you what's the difference between the global south and the global north, the global south is not countries below the equator, technically speaking, or within Caribbean thought, or economically speaking. Do not give me that answer. The global south is not below the equator. Come on, man. The global south are countries that were usually called third world countries, but because language changed, we don't use third world anymore, because third world suggests second and last, and they used to use those words to ascribe to people who are historically behind. So now we say the global south to define countries that are developing or that were once called third world, as against global north that were the post-industrial countries, the global north, the US, the France, and so on, the UK. Okay? That's what we say, the global south and the global north countries. Very important. So they've used debt with Haiti. They've used structural adjustment between the 70s and the 90s to create debt throughout the Caribbean and South Africa and many other, parts of Africa and throughout the formerly colonized countries. Okay? They've used CIA, the FBI and so on to penetrate, going into countries like to Maurice Bishop and to Grenada, going to Grenada. Yes? When countries the thing is, and I said in an interview on a radio station some time ago, I said we will not deal with the problem of illegal immigration until we fix the problem of unfair competition in the world today. Unfair competition that creates income inequality. Unfair competition that creates poverty and high level of crime and violence, because we talk about relative deprivation is a Marxist ideology that says where you have high levels of income inequality and poverty, you have high levels of crime and violence. That is what defines internal colonies of the US. That is what defines the Caribbean.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Yes, I see your hand. Go ahead.
It's not just me, somebody else as well. But my question is, you've mentioned China quite a lot in terms of creating the exact word you use. Well, not exact word, but what you were referring to is America doing free trade with all of the Americas so that China would get competition. May I ask, what is your issue with China doing trade in this side of the world?
China is doing trading in. Okay, I'm gonna ask it another way. In fact, since we are on that, and I was talking about unpaid slavery, I will table that.
Thank you. Yeah, my orange. Yeah.
And my hand was up as well, sir, and it was somewhat of the same question I was
By the way,
asking. Do you think
I wrote an article some time ago. I'll read it in a few minutes. Challenges to humanity: China, cryptocurrency, Russia, and artificial intelligence. One, and then China, Trump, and Jamaica.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, we can hear you, my
Oh,
darling.
because I've been talking and
I know, it's okay. It's okay. We can hear you. We can.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so that was my question, sir. I wanted to ask you. So I wanted to, well, not really a question, but just to say, I am wondering if it's because China is now making move on Jamaica. I don't know if everyone remember the other day where the Prime Minister came out and stated that USA called him in a meeting. Up until now, I don't believe we've gotten any feedback as to what the meeting is about. But I am wondering, could it be that they're inviting us to the table to trade, or is that they're putting
warns Caribbean leaders?
I don't want to say recommend us to not go to China, but I'm just wondering if, with all that is going on, if that could be one of the reasons they're
I'm gonna respond. I'm sorry. I'm gonna share this. I interviewed some Jamaicans about this. I'm gonna share it and what they say. And I'm gonna give you my perspective. I have an opinion, and if you follow me, you'll hear my opinion. And if you listen to what I'm saying, I've made several references to Russia and Ukraine. Why? Why do I make references to Russia and Ukraine? Why do I talk about 1944 and the creation of a world order? We talk about, don't fool yourselves. We live, and I think, and I'm so happy that we're teaching this course and you guys are sitting here as Jamaicans we're talking about, and this is important. I do not want what happened in Ukraine happen to Jamaica. The fact of the matter is we are a vulnerable country. And we have to be strategic and not naive. There is a world order. China in Asia, Russia in, where's Russia again? Where does Russia control? What's the superpower there? Where is their domain? Where's Russia, guys? Guys?
So
hello?
You're asking a question?
Yeah, where is Russia? Where is Russia?
Europe.
Where in Europe?
So you're asking the position?
Yes. Eastern Europe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in Eastern Europe. So, all right. And you know the countries in Eastern Europe, yes?
I'm assuming so.
All right.
Yes.
Good. Poland, Kazakhstan, the former USSR countries. Yes. Yes, Leroy, please pray. We need to pray. And I, as academics who are prophets, who are open to the world and who spend time with before God, you want to also pray based on what is going on in the world. I pray every day against World War III. I pray every day against that God would protect our country against despots and tyranny. We are not far removed from Ukraine and what can happen there and what's going on in Panama. Jamaica is a very vulnerable country, very small. And now we have a Jamaican leader who, I'm not a JLP or PNP, so please don't attack me because I may say something that is pro-JLP or pro-PNP. I'm not. And I'm not a Democrat or a Republican either. I'm an independent through and through. Okay? We have made many mistakes, and that is why I sent a copy of my book to the Minister of Education, and he likes it and so on. And I said I need Jamaicans to get a copy of the book. But I'm gonna share a discussion I made. I mean, a point I made as it relates to the world order since 1944 and who controls various aspects of the world. In 1944, all the countries, all the dominant countries came together, including Russia. Russia.
Sir, not to cut you or anything, but
the US controls. I mean, I'm going to tell you this. I say I believe in freedom. I don't care who Jamaica trade with, but I do care.
No,
okay.
But the question was, what is the issue with China? But you're talking about Russia, so I'm trying to figure out if we're getting to the China part or we just skip it all together. That's all I want to know. Because I was about to take notes. So that's all I'm asking.
No, you shouldn't take notes. Okay. You can take notes, but I am making the point that there is a world order from 1944, okay, which was created to help to secure peace in the world. Part of that negotiation or arrangement was that there are superpowers in the world, and each of those superpowers creates create a presence in the world, and they will not cross paths with each other so as to maintain a kind of peace. China dominates the East. Russia in Eastern Europe and so on. The Americas, UK and so on, they're in that part of the world, in the Western Europe and so on. Okay. What we have is that Russia, Ukraine was foolhardy. Vladimir Zelensky, I've said it before in an article, he was stubborn. And I've said it, I'm going to say this. I'm sorry. He was an opportunist. And I think he made a stupid decision that affected his whole country. Okay. He allowed his country to go into war and could have averted the war because he decided to do business with the enemy. He decided to do business with NATO and the US. He decided to bring NATO and the US into Russia's dominated area, a superpower in the backyard of the dominant superpower. There is a geopolitical understanding. There was negotiations, and Vladimir Zelensky decided that he's not going to back down. He's going to pursue relationship. Of course, countries are free to pursue relationship, whatever they want to pursue. Yes, I'm not saying that. And when I speak to you, I am speaking to you about what exists. Okay? We're not going to play. And I said to you, we have to have information. We can't be naive. Russia. So there we go. Vladimir Zelensky decided he doesn't care. He's going to do business with Russia. He's going to do business with NATO and Ukraine, with NATO and with the enemy. That's a problem for Putin. Not only that, Ukraine and the former US, the former colonies of Russia are growing. They're becoming more effective. They're becoming more dynamic. They're growing. When you look at the GDP of Kazakhstan and these other Poland and these other countries, they're rivaling, in fact, outstripping that of Russia. That is a problem. The only GDP, the only former USSR country that never had a GDP higher than that of Russia was one of them was Ukraine. But Ukraine was rising and they have a lot of minerals and growth. Now, the problem is that here we have Ukraine doing business with another superpower. And not only that, not only doing business, but has the potential to outstrip and to outdo Russia. That's a problem for the superpower. Instead of making a deal, instead of sitting down at the table and negotiating and talking with the Russians and create, no, he said, no, I'm going to do it anyway, and thinking that he can rely on France and so on to protect him. Okay. And he decided to hold his position, and so Russia and Vladimir Putin decided to go to war. You push forward, you learn from history, you learn from experiences. Push forward 2024. Jamaica decided to do business with the Chinese. China. This is the same country. These are the same people that put the whole of the COVID people and burned down the whole building. These are the people we're going to do business with. Anyway, and some people say, I'd rather do business with, pick your poison, some people say. China or the US. That's what they say. Anyways, whatever the case is. We know that China is a superpower, and there is a fierce economic battle between China and the US. And all these, you know what Bob Marley said, me not Rasta. Sorry, I don't look to the east and I don't look to the west. You know, when he say I don't look to the east and I don't look to the west, what is he talking about? The east, what's the east? China. And I don't look to communism. I don't look to China or Russia. I don't look to China. What's the west? The US. I don't look to the east or the west. I don't look to communism or capitalism. Again, when Bob Marley said I don't look to the east or the west, I look to the I and I. What's the east? China or communism. What's the west? Capitalism. I don't look to them, and I don't look to that, and I don't look to Western ideology or Eastern ideology. I look within. I look to our ideology, the I and I. So right now, Russia, the US, let me tell you, Jamaica has one of the most modern ports. Jamaica in this part of the world is the eye or the gateway to doing trading in the world and this part of the Western Hemisphere. Jamaica's ports is one of the 7th largest in this region. China is trying to get a foothold in the Americas, in the US domain, in the US dominated region. That can pose a serious problem. Russia, they have their ships in the Cuban water. Why? China, they're in Panama and the Caribbean and so on. The Caribbean has largely enjoyed peace that we've never seen. You know, we've largely been a very peaceful region in the world when we think, and we all operate as everything is fine. And the war is in the east, is in the Middle East, but we are fine over here. But what you have China coming and Russia occupying, and then that's a problem for the US. And here it is now. Who is president? Donald Trump. Who is friends with Vladimir Putin? Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine and threatens to invade all of Eastern Europe because they are doing business with NATO and the US and the enemy. With the NATO, with the other Western enemy, Germany and so on. He invaded Ukraine. It was easy for him to invade Ukraine because he could have invaded other countries, but he invaded Ukraine, and now they're at war. Here it is. Let's bring it back home to this situation. Jamaica. Jamaica has decided to do business with China. Ukraine has decided to do business with Russia. Sorry, Ukraine has decided to do business with Germany, France. Russia says, no, that's a problem. They are the enemy. You're bringing them into our turf, right into the steps of our backyard. They don't care. They're going to do it anyway because they said, we're a free country. We can do it. Fine, you're free, but there is an international, there is a world order. There's a world order. And there's peace that, according to Vladimir Putin, NATO is negating. And so for him, the justification for him is that there is an established rule. That is why he was doing what he's doing, because there is an accepted rule. Because first of all these countries are doing it. All these countries have done the same thing. They have all done it. All the big superpowers have done it. They've all done that until there's an understanding. Russia is penetrating countries. France have done it. They've gone into other smaller countries and so on to reassert their power and their power. They've done that. So Russia justification is that they are going to reassert their dominance in the region. Because right now their dominance and their position is threatened because of this smaller country that's doing business with another superpower that is outside of the region. That is why they are at war today. That is the very same thing that is brewing in the Caribbean, where Jamaica is doing business with another superpower right at the back door or back step of Jamaica, of the US, which can cause a war.
Choose America or China. You can't have both. Trump warns Caribbean leaders. Choose America or China. You can't have both. Is the Caribbean... Trump warns Caribbean leaders. Choose America or China. You can't have both. Is the Caribbean caught in the middle of a new Cold War? Donald Trump has reportedly sent a clear warning to Caribbean leaders. Either stand with America or risk losing U.S. support by deepening ties with China. As tensions between Washington and Beijing escalate, the Caribbean has become a key battleground for influence. With billions of dollars in Chinese investments pouring into the region and the U.S. looking to reassert control, Trump's message is loud and clear. Choose wisely. This isn't just a political showdown. It's about economic survival, national security, and the future of the Caribbean. With China building ports, highways, and energy projects in several nations, the U.S. sees a direct threat to its dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Trump, known for his America First policies, is now pressuring leaders in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and the wider Caribbean to rethink their partnerships. The big question is, will the Caribbean comply or resist?
We must be prepared. We can't approach this with any panic.
In the last 2 decades, China has aggressively expanded its economic footprint in the Caribbean. From the Baha Mar Resort in the Bahamas.
Are you guys watching this? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I said, by the way, I did a show. When I was in Jamaica, I did interview some Jamaicans and I talked about this before this particular show came up, before they were talking about this. And the Prime Minister wasn't really talking about it. And I did send a message to him and I said, as academics, at Jamaica Theological Seminary, we have a responsibility. It's not just you. Jamaica Theological Seminary, we are pastors that we're being trained. We're prophets. That's our responsibility. I said, don't be naive. And I'm not saying that to be rude. I'm being honest because I love Jamaica. I love my country. I don't throw stones behind. I give God thanks for the opportunity to be here and to learn what I have in the US. But I love my country. And when I say things, I don't say it. When I say things, I'm not, by the way, I might be saying what you are saying. And if you read my book, you know that's what I'm saying. But the problem is, the point I'm making, we must learn from history. And we must not be naive. The Caribbean, and I said that Caribbean government must not be naive. They must learn from history. They can't trust China either. And I'm saying to you, they have used embargo on Cuba for years. The U.S., and I'm going to ask you the question, what it is that separates Cuba and Haiti from all the other Caribbean countries like Jamaica and Barbados and Trinidad? They are largely part integrated into the Western system. They are. Because they are complicit and docile and their hands are pretty much tied, and the independence that they got was the independence that was within the mold of the master. But Cuba and Haiti took their independence. They took their freedom. It wasn't any ceremony. That was a problem. And those two countries have the potential to rival the US. They have minerals and people who are effective, who are unique, who are creative, the Caribbean. But we can never outduel the Canada or so on. Because we are divided, yes, one. And two, the superpower have put certain things, policies, restrictions. They've used all kinds of strategies, debt as a strategy to force them to do certain things. And then charge high interest rates, force you to open up your economies and so on. Some people would tell you, sold us a religion that make us docile and denying African spirituality, which was what had always, which African heroes had always relied on to give them strength, but now they are in bed with the same masters, embracing a religion that has made them docile. I'm going to probably wrap up class with this, but I also, and with the presentation and with a podcast, I did interviewing some Jamaicans and reflecting on this very same thing, because I actually meant to talk about this in class today, stemming from critical thinking. That's what critical thinking does. Critical thinking, and I talk about Afrocentric paradigm, it's about pattern. It's about seeing things, looking at the pattern, reading things, being prophet, really delving into things. Don't just sit down and see Jamaica. First of all, Jamaica has benefit from investment. Don't just blame the US. Don't just blame people. We have also shot ourselves in the foot. I talk about that in my book. We'll get to that. And in Life and Death, and when we start talking about corruption, we'll get to that. The most corrupt countries are black and brown countries or former colonized countries as well. So fine, there have been small opportunities where Caribbean countries could have gotten to the next level, but they also have affected their impact. First of all, by creating an elitist class, and that elitist, let's say for example, part of the problem with Haiti today is because of the elitist class, the status quo that is in bed with the international regime. That's okay, where their lives they are living fine, but everybody else. Probably Michael Manley, or maybe you might say Edward Siago, or different people, or different political, or maybe various political directorates. Or that's corruption has affected the Caribbean. We have lost a lot of money. To the point where there's been a lot of investment in Jamaica. In fact, the other day I was in Jamaica and they were saying, where is the money? Okay, they sell all these. They were asking, where's the money for the airport? Sangster's Airport. Was it Sangster's Airport in Kingston? Sangster's Airport. They couldn't find the money. And many other. Where is the money? Or if there is money, there's hardly any. And right now, I don't want to say too much, but my sister in Jamaica, who is an accountant, a chief accountant for a big institution, and they want to get rid of her to the point where she asked me if I could contact the prime minister on her behalf, because they are trying to spend the money flippantly, and she's trying to hold them accountable, and that's a problem.
Sir, isn't the airport owned by the Mexicans? Leased to the Mexicans. So I don't understand the concept.
And they were paid millions, yes, and they were. I don't know who owned it, but they were paid millions of dollars. They leased it, and they were paid millions of dollars in advance. And I understand that they couldn't find the money. I heard the other day that they eventually found some of it, but I don't know what the long and short of it is. Okay. But I mean, there have been a lot of. So go ahead, yeah.
In terms of you saying that we put some countries, namely the Caribbean, put ourselves in bad positions with superpowers. Wouldn't you say the same about the US, who allegedly own China trillions of dollars? Could that be the reason why they do not want other countries to do business with China because of
they are all superpowers. They are all superpowers. The US is fine, and
so
China.
They're all but sir, yeah. How can a country be a superpower if they owe another country trillions of dollars? Make that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, but yet China owes trillions of dollars to the US too. I'm telling you that.
They do not. China does not owe the US any money, sir. The US owed China trillions of dollars in contracts and other loans that was given to them and bonds. That was proven. That can be researched and found. China does not owe the US money.
Yeah,
that's propaganda.
No, China does not owe the US any money, but does hold a significant amount.
You just said that.
No. Listen to the point I'm making. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that China holds a significant amount of US debt. Okay? China has $749 billion of US debt. Okay? Making it the largest foreign holder of US debt. Both countries rely on each other. They are competitive. That's what they do. So the people in parliament, they argue and fight. But at the end of the day, it's a small man that gets hit. China is going to be fine. Wait, let me finish. China is going to be fine. The US is going to be fine. China.
I beg to disagree.
China is
do not believe that the US will be fine, sir. I beg to disagree, and we will have this debate today. China literally said that they're willing to go toe-to-toe, and if they want a war, they can have it. Based on the resources that the US depends on China for, the US will be hit, and will be hit significantly. China is one of the only countries that does business with everywhere.
Okay, thank you. I am not concerned about China. They are not vulnerable. China, the US, these superpowers, they can afford to absorb. My concern is Ukraine. My concern is Jamaica and the Caribbean region. Can the Caribbean region absorb any kind of war, any kind of invasion, any kind of embargo? Because the Jamaica today still owes the US billions of dollars. Jamaica today still benefit from aid. Jamaica today, millions of aid still benefit from remittances that they can affect. Cuba is not. The reason why Cuba is one of the poorest countries in the region today is because of US embargo, and yet they are friends with China.
Okay, so you brought up Cuba being one of the poorest countries, but yet Cuba's health system, you don't hear Cubans getting sick and dying. You don't hear Cubans going to other countries begging for money. Cubans have been raised or brought up to bed with what they have, because it's what they're used to. Yes, you have other Cubans who would
hold on. Notice the question. What they are used to. They have become used to that based on the embargo. But yet,
sir, what you're saying is still not to the point of what you're making the reference to. You cannot refer to a country like Cuba who has become self-efficient. I've never heard Cuba going out and begging any other country for anything. So I don't think Cuba would be the best country to use as reference.
No.
Cuba
Cuba, wait. Let me make the point. No. I disagree with you. You said no. You said while Cuba may be poor, you stop right there. You are contradicting yourself.
I am not.
Yes, no. Let me finish my point. As your professor, I am going to tell you that you would let your professor talk. I allow you to speak. Allow me to speak.
Fine, sir.
Good. I am saying you have contradicted yourself. You contradicted yourself by saying while they may be poor, they are poor because of an embargo. They are one of the poorest countries in the region. I have been to Cuba. You would not want to live in Cuba because of the lifestyle that you are used to. Jamaica, okay. Now the problem is, I'm saying to you, I am not saying that this is not what I want. I'm telling you what is going on right now. Jamaica will have to think about and weigh they have to be willing to accept any impact that may come to them based on our decision or Jamaican decision to pursue a relationship with another superpower that may not have their best interest either, because we thought US had our best interest and many countries, but that has never been. The black and brown people have never been in the interest of no one. Cuba is poor because they decide to snub the US. And they wanted to pursue communism, a communist government. I'm not saying something is wrong with that. I'm just telling you what is. Venezuela could have been a much more dynamic country in the region today. Venezuela. Cuba is one of the poorest countries in the world. And although they have, they have some healthcare system, they are still suffering today. Okay, so I am telling. So now the question is by doing. I'm just saying to you, by doing business with Jamaica. What I'm saying, the way of the world, the way in which the world that we find ourselves. This is where we find ourselves. When you are in Rome, you see stuff happening in Rome. That's how it is. We live in the Western world. China wants to go to, and it seems as if they are pulling every stop to go to war with Taiwan. And they're doing everything in their power to go to war with Taiwan. And there have been many skirmishes with Taiwan because especially Taiwan, is doing business. And by the way, there's a relationship between Taiwan and the US. China has a problem because they believe they should control Hong Kong, they should control Taiwan, they should control South Korea, they should control all that area. Russia, same thing. The US, same thing. Or if it's not controlled, they should be the dominant region. Whenever the status quo, whenever their dominance is threatened, that's a problem. I'm gonna have you. Let me have you continue watching that video again about Jamaica. Okay, where is it? Caribbean Thought Lecture 3.
To highways in Jamaica and port expansions in Trinidad, Beijing has been pouring billions into infrastructure projects across the region. Unlike the United States, China offers easy access loans with low interest rates, often requiring no political conditions. This has made them an attractive alternative for cash-strapped Caribbean governments looking for ways to develop their economies without the bureaucracy of Western financial institutions. However, these deals come with concerns. Many of these loans are structured under China's debt diplomacy model, where if a country is unable to repay, Beijing can take control of strategic assets. This has already happened in Sri Lanka, where China
There's a reason why I wrote my book, Neoliberalism. And I also said Jamaica must also be careful. The Caribbean must be careful. We've done business with the post-industrial, with the US and all these countries, and it has not augured well for us. Now we're going to do business with China. I mean, do we know the terms of the deal? Do we understand? Is it the same kind of IMF thing? What's going on with this deal? We have to be careful as well. But let's continue.
China now controls a major port due to a defaulted loan. Could the same fate await Caribbean nations? The US seems to think so, and that's why Trump's administration is now drawing a red line on China's growing influence.
China and Caribbean countries have a long tradition of friendly exchanges. Our diplomatic relations are roughly as old as CARICOM. 10 years ago, President Xi Jinping paid a historic visit to Trinidad and Tobago and met with leaders of all the Caribbean countries having diplomatic relations with China and established the China-Caribbean Comprehensive Cooperative Partnership. And ever since then, we have made great achievements and accomplishments, and China-Caribbean relations has become a shining example of mutual respect, equality, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation.
Reports suggest that Trump has privately warned Caribbean leaders that continued alignment with China could have serious consequences. His administration views China's economic involvement in the region as a direct challenge to U.S. authority. Washington's fear is that these projects are not just about business, but also about Beijing gaining long-term strategic leverage over the region. With China controlling key infrastructure, the U.S. worries that Caribbean nations might be forced to side with Beijing in future diplomatic disputes. A senior White House official reportedly stated, "The United States will not stand by and watch as our closest neighbors drift into the orbit of a communist regime." This suggests that Caribbean leaders could face economic or diplomatic consequences if they refuse to distance themselves from China. Could Trump threaten trade deals, impose sanctions, or even reduce aid? History shows that the U.S. has used economic pressure in the past to get its way. The Caribbean might soon find itself caught in a dangerous game between two superpowers.
The U.S. has not spent great amounts of money in Latin America.
And the Chinese, for years.
They have very high levels of investment just about in every country, from Venezuela to Brazil to Argentina to Bolivia to Chile.
The Chinese government and closely aligned military affiliates have spent billions in our region granting loans and building political alliances.
For Caribbean leaders, this is a high-stakes dilemma. On one hand, China has provided much-needed financial support, helping to fund roads, hospitals, and energy projects without the political conditions often attached to Western aid. On the other hand, the U.S. remains the Caribbean's largest trading partner, the main source of remittances, and a key ally in security and regional stability. If Trump follows through on his warning, Caribbean nations could find themselves cut off from U.S. economic support, a move that could devastate their already fragile economies. At the same time, China's investments come with long-term obligations. If Caribbean nations cannot repay their debts, they risk handing over key assets to Beijing, leading to a loss of sovereignty. This is not just an economic decision, it's a geopolitical one. If the region chooses China...
Guys, are you listening? Are you guys there?
We're here, sir.
You know, I mean, and thank you for having that debate with me just now. It was good. Just so you know. And by the way, these are some of the, I do this every day. Debates is what I do. And that is very good. But I'm happy that I like this kind of debate because I like to create excitement around these things, because this is and I said to people, you may not agree with the conversations that I'm facilitating, but I am not saying that Jamaica shouldn't do business with China. I'm not saying that Jamaica shouldn't do business with the US. But we have done business with. We understand how the world works and how people see black African people or black and brown people. We know how. Okay, we know what has dogged Caribbean development, and so we have to be careful about the arrangement that we're making with these superpowers and how it is being done. Okay, we have to consider. Let me finish. We have to consider everything. And then again, and I said, what is the terms of the agreement? What if we cannot pay off the highway? What if suddenly there's a major catastrophe and the hurricane and the roads got the roads get destroyed and we can't pay to fix the road and at the same but we still have to pay China every month. But something happened to the road or to the what happened? Is there any wiggle room for we know that at least the problem was debt in terms of the IMF, and they came in and said you have to do this, you have to get rid of tariff, you have to open up your economies, you have to do this and that. We know with the IMF and so on. What the deal with China? What are we gonna give up with if we can't pay, if we default? For them, we're hearing that in Sri Lanka they are giving up whole land, whole places. It's different. What is the deal? First of all, how keen how aware Jamaicans are. Because in 1960, 78, we weren't really aware. But now that we know and that's why I'm doing this. Richard, so what's up with this? No, what's up with this? I'm trying to facilitate conversations so that Jamaicans now can hold their government accountable and don't make it like 10 years, 50 years ago. But okay, we have to know. So the Ukraine can go and just make a decision and now his whole country suffer. The leaders must tell the people what's going on, and they have to be careful about the decisions. We know how China operate. I will be afraid of doing business with China. I have never been a friend of China. I'm going to tell you that. I am not, personally speaking, okay? Based in terms of how they operate. And then, in terms of, first of all, in terms of how they operate, where they are in the world, what they've done. I have seen how they treated the people in Wuhan that had COVID. They forced them all in a building and burned down the building. That's a problem. There are many other things we can talk about, but we won't go there. But I'm saying to you, these are some things we have to think about. I know I hear the Prime Minister, we have to be strong together. We have to be strong together. But how are we strong together? First of all, Caribbean unity there is still shaky. We can't even help Haiti. I know you guys have something, but I don't want you guys to run out of the class. Let's finish this video. We're going to play another one, and then I'm going to take questions and finish the class.
It risks angering the U.S. If it aligns with America, it may lose access to critical funding from Beijing. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, Caribbean governments must decide whether to prioritize short-term economic gains or long-term geopolitical stability. So, what happens next? Will Caribbean leaders comply with Trump's warning and distance themselves from China? Or will they continue to pursue Beijing's financial backing despite the risks? The coming months will be crucial in determining how this power struggle unfolds. Some governments may attempt a delicate balancing act, maintaining strong ties with both powers without fully committing to either. Others may be forced to choose a side if economic or diplomatic pressure from the U.S. intensifies. If Trump is serious about confronting China's influence, we could see major policy shifts, potential trade restrictions, diplomatic efforts to counter China's presence, or even increased military presence in the region. On the flip side, Beijing is unlikely to back down, meaning the Caribbean could become an even bigger battleground in this new Cold War. One thing is certain, this fight for influence is far from over, and Caribbean nations must tread carefully to avoid being collateral damage in a global power struggle. This battle between superpowers is heating up fast. Should Caribbean nations bow to Trump's pressure and cut ties with China? Or should they continue to take Beijing's money and risk U.S. retaliation? What would you do if you were a Caribbean leader? Let us.
What would you do if you were a Caribbean leader? Anybody wants to answer that question? What would you do if you continue to do business with China? So you risk retaliation from the U.S. Can you afford retaliation from the U.S.? Can you afford retaliation from the U.S. based on vulnerability and so on? But two, Jamaica, although we're doing business with the U.S., with China, we still have business with the U.S. So with China, we have business with the U.S. There's a lot of investment that's pumped in Jamaica. Right. Still, a lot of
What is
investment.
the benefit of us doing business with the US apart from remittance?
Sorry?
What is the benefit of doing business with the United States apart from remittance? What investment have the United States willingly, keyword willingly, given to Jamaica that benefits Jamaica? What exactly does the benefit of having the United States as an ally that treats Jamaicans like crap have in Jamaica? Just asking.
You believe? Okay. No, but you believe. First of all, you make an assumption. You said that you make a generalization. You said U.S. Treats Jamaican like crap. That's an assumption you're making. Okay, so you have to clarify that. But before your question is answered,
sir, you make an assumption that
Rashane, you will not speak while I'm speaking. Before your question is answered, you will consider my question, the question that I put to you. Okay. And first of all, you asked a question meaning that the investment in Jamaica, your awareness of U.S. dependence on Jamaica, Jamaica's dependence on the U.S. is limited to remittances. It's limited. And just so you know, a remittance is a big reason why you don't want to piss off the U.S. anyways. But outside of that, Jamaica and the Caribbean have benefit over there, and Jamaica still owes the US and the IMF and the World Bank. And currently, right now, Jamaica benefits from billions of dollars of investment and foreign aid. Okay? And foreign aid. So my question is, what are you guys willing to continue doing business with Jamaica, with China, and risk U.S. retaliation? And what does that look like? Rashane asked a very good question. She said, well, they've only treated us like crap. Of course, I mean, not necessarily true, but that's her opinion. Maybe her experience that's her opinion, though, and that's fine. She believes that the U.S. have treated Jamaica and the Caribbean. And if you read my book, I might allude to that to some extent in a more data-driven way, Rashane. But I have to be. I have to be careful. The U.S. has not treated Jamaica like crap. Okay. All right.
With all due respect, sir, your bias is showing, but you know what? Let's leave the conversation there. Thank you for entertaining the conversation.
Yes, the U.S. has not treated Jamaica like crap, but obviously you don't know what I'm saying and where I'm going, but that is fine.
I completely understand what you're saying, and I did not limit the statement to just Jamaica. I meant the entire Caribbean, not just Jamaica. But as I stated before, thank you for entertaining the conversation. I respect your opinion on same. I do not agree.
Yes, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is that you made a generalization. It's not a generalization. Okay, and it's your opinion about Jamaica. But what I do believe that over the years, Jamaica has suffered as a result of the IMF and the World Bank. But that's what all superpowers do. Russia do it to Ukraine. China do it to the satellite countries. The US does it. Germany, they all do it to their countries. So we are now going to we're going to trust China over the US. But but Bob Marley said, I don't look to the east or the west, I look to the iron eye. Okay. We have not, since I was independent, we have not been able to work in a way to develop our independence. We still rely heavily on investment from external investment from superpowers who they have only invested in black and brown countries at our expense. China and if you and now you have a situation where these small countries are caught in the middle. And that's now creating a problem. Can the Caribbean now give up their 20, 40, 50 years of comfort of the geopolitical stability. Jamaica has experienced geopolitical stability more so than Cuba. Cuba, it has been a little bit tense, but Jamaica and Haiti, but Jamaica and Venezuela, but Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, are we now ready to know are we now ready to give up our geopolitical stability that we have had over the years, in a geopolitical, not necessarily economic, but geopolitical stability, not necessarily economic, geopolitical stability? Are we willing to give that up in order to remain in bed with the Chinese? And then, according to the US is saying as well, is that part of the problem is that China is hoping to take, if the Caribbean defaults on its loan, then the deal that the Caribbean have with Jamaica is one that gives China controlling interests within certain aspect of the region. And they are trying to mitigate that as well. So the argument is that they are trying to mitigate, because if anything, the US will have to protect the Caribbean. The Caribbean countries historically does not have a military, but if they need to be protected, they will look to the US, because first of all, the US would not want any superpower to come into their backyard and to invade and to control, because if another superpower come into their backyard or within the region of the Americas, then it would also threaten or affect their dominance, because they are the dominant country within the region. So then they would protect that smaller country. But of course, that's part of it. But what I'm saying right now, so with what's going on in the world today, the president that the US has, the government of populism throughout the world, and with what's going on in the world, it seems as if the Caribbean, Jamaica, Barbados, Canada, that has largely been stable geopolitically, is bracing them. We are bracing ourselves from the retaliation because it could mean that Jamaica could the US could place embargo on Jamaica on Jamaica and parts of the Caribbean. Cuba has suffered, and Venezuela and these countries have suffered. What you don't hear about is where many persons have died, where many persons have suffered in the embryonic stages of these embargoes, which have what are we afford to lose, what are we afford to give up? Is it part of our resistance? What is that resistance? Fine. Does resistance mean we don't do business with none of them and we develop our own independence and indomitability and so on? Quite interesting. I will share one last video and then we end class. Hold on a second. Christina, go ahead. Christina, go ahead. Christina, you wanted to say something? Okay, fine. I'm going to share this is probably 10 minutes and then we wrap class up. And then next week we will pick it up. Okay, but this was great, powerful. This was very refreshing, very intense. Love every minute of it. Hold on, guys. Let me just find this a last video for you guys to watch, and then we are done. And then we can wrap up. There's one more video I wanted you two guys to see. Here we go. It's just 19 minutes, and we just watch a few minutes of it. I was speaking with some Jamaicans while I was in Jamaica. It's called China, Trump, and Jamaica. It's a debacle brewing. Can you guys see my screen? You can see the screen, right?
No, sir. And can you share this video in the WhatsApp group, sir?
Oh, sure.
Yes, please.
It's not really. I think it's an audio. It's more audio than video. All right. It's a bit.
That's
It's
okay. If you send it in the WhatsApp group for the persons who are not able to come to class, they would be able to listen to it or watch it.
yeah. I'm gonna
And it
ask.
would be more beneficial that way.
No problem. I'm gonna ask. Chantel, share. Can you share this video? We'll get it done. We'll send it to you guys.
Chantel is not on today.
Oh, she's not.
Chantel is not on today.
All right.
No.
It's called China, Trump, and Jamaica. It's a debacle brewing. All right. Listen to this quickly, and then we wrap up class. Share China and Trump. Is this it? No. Yes, that's it. There we go. Remember how Ukraine allowed NATO and US to come into Russia's eastern turf? Remember how Ukraine allowed NATO and US to come into Russia's eastern turf, causing a war? Now, Jamaica has allowed China, another superpower, into USA's western turf. This poses a problem for Andrew Holness and Jamaica. I talk about it next on my podcast, The Neoliberal Round, entitled China, Trump and Jamaica. Is a debacle brewing? China, Trump and Jamaica. Is a debacle brewing. We have a Jamaican here. Good afternoon. Good morning, rather. What do you feel about China doing business in Jamaica?
I don't know.
You're not sure?
No.
You don't feel, you don't think that that's a problem?
Yeah, I know it's a problem.
But so what?
China take over Jamaica, Jamaica get worse.
And Jamaica gotten worse.
Mm-hmm.
So before the Chinese, who had control of Jamaica?
No, Jamaicans.
You think Jamaicans, but from 1990?
The Americans.
The Americans, but
and
okay.
English.
From the English.
That's what I heard growing up.
So let me ask you a question. Did you hear what's going on with Donald Trump?
In terms of
demanding the Chinese to leave?
No, I heard. No, not really.
Not really. Mm-mm. So, but what do you think about the U.S. or Donald Trump saying China must leave Jamaica?
I think he's right.
Ah.
Because them come and take over the country, so we'll have less work.
Yes.
Because the Chinese come in and do our work.
Wow.
So people are less employed because of the Chinese. I think that's my thought on it.
Right. So are you JLP or PNP? None. So okay. All right. So what do you think? Do you think it was under the JLP administration that this happened? You say?
The JLP, yeah.
Okay.
JLP have been in power for a while, so it must be JLP.
Must be them. Okay. And Jamaica, what do you think? Many other Jamaicans believe the same thing, feel the same way like what you are feeling, what your position.
I don't know their opinion. I haven't spoken to anybody.
Oh wow. Yes.
I don't really speak politics.
Yes.
Because I've never voted.
But you are a Jamaican and you are concerned about Jamaica's interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There we go. We are speaking with a young woman about Jamaica and what it's becoming. Let's ask someone who was originally from here, but now lives in the UK. Hi, how are you? What do you feel about China's investment in Jamaica? What do you think about the relationship with China and Jamaica?
I don't know.
Yes. Oh, have you heard about it?
Yes.
You know that the Chinese, I'm hearing that the Chinese are taking over Jamaica with a lot of investment. Do you think that poses a problem for the UK and the US?
I think it does, yes.
Oh, how so you think?
I don't know.
I have another question. Donald Trump is demanding the Chinese to leave. What do you think about that? Yes?
I don't know, because I don't do politics. I keep away from politics.
From politics. There we go. Let me ask another. Hi, what do you think about the Chinese investing in Jamaica heavily?
Good in it, but I mean, good about it. Good in it.
Some Jamaicans are saying that they don't have any work because of the investment.
And then?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Yes, this is interesting. This is the Neoliberal Round podcast coming to you from Jamaica. Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. I am in Hillshire, St. Catherine, Jamaica. And with me is Austin. Welcome to the show, Austin. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning, yeah.
Good morning, good morning. Last night we were having some deep political conversations about about Donald Trump and we understand that Donald Trump is demanding the Chinese or China to leave Jamaica because China is heavily invested in Jamaica, and we had a discussion about whether or not Trump can demand the Chinese to leave Jamaica, and many Jamaicans that we've spoken to have said no, he's ridiculous. He can't demand China to leave Jamaica. What does he think of? First of all, China has so much investment in Jamaica already, and I think some people, I'm hearing of a 50-year lease because they have taken over they have fixed the ports. They have or taken over the ports or leased the ports or whatever the case is. And they have also spent some money in terms of connecting the points across Jamaica. We're talking about the highway. They have given Jamaican the money. In fact, they have taken over the highway because they're going to take it over for the next 50 years until it pays for itself. Okay, once they have gotten the money that they've invested in helping Jamaica with this highway and so on, they will leave. I believe that's the case. Okay, so however, it is. But But the problem is, Jamaicans need to understand, when I ask the question, when we ask the question whether or not Trump can demand China to leave, it's a serious question, and it's a question that you must consider. Jamaicans must also consider the consequences of the decision making to lie in bed with the Chinese. The consequences of lying in bed with the Chinese. Now, this is important. You have to think about it in relation to what is going on in Russia and in Ukraine. In Russia and Ukraine. This is deep, and I talk about this in the new book that's coming up. This is what I study. I study globalization. But this is very important for Jamaicans must understand this. And everybody must understand this. This is deep. Let me begin by saying this. China is the enemy of the US. They are rivals. China controls their part of the world. Okay? The US controls our part of the world. Russia controls their part of the world. There is an understanding among superpowers in the world. Okay? When they signed the NATO agreement or the Security Council, everybody have their control, and you respect that. When Russia decided to go to war or to invade Ukraine, it was on the backdrop that Ukraine is doing business with the enemy or with another rival superpower, and there is an understanding in the world. There is a world order. There is a framework within which the world system operates. Okay? So NATO, and that is why Vladimir Putin is saying that Russia and NATO, they are hypocrites. Okay? Because they control their hemisphere, and now they are coming into Ukraine. That poses a problem. That is a problem because of the agreement that all countries have. The framework that we have as the world. Ukraine is doing business with NATO, and they are creeping into and who controls this part of the world? Russia. So of course Vladimir Putin went to war with Ukraine to whip them, to flog them. I said to you yesterday that Zelensky was dumb. Zelensky was out of his mind. He was an opportunist. Okay, but not only that, he made a decision that has caused him and his country the fate that he now has. He's now sandwiched between NATO and Russia. Okay? Now, I'm not going to tell you whether or not Zelensky should have done that, but it was poor decision making. He should have weighed the cost and should have discussed it with his country whether or not to do business with Ukraine and Russia. And not Ukraine. The next thing is that Russia does not expect these other countries to do better than Russia. Yes, you have your independence, but you cannot do better than Mother Russia. You understand? So if Poland and Kazakhstan and all these countries start to do better than Mother Russia, or they form the superpower, that is also a problem. And now you're going to do business with NATO, a rival in superpower. Now let's bring it back home to Jamaica. Jamaica is doing business with another superpower that is now in the Jamaica. Okay, our harbor, the Kingston Harbor, is the largest is the 7th largest in the Western Hemisphere. It is the gateway to doing trading in the world. What it is that we have now is China. The China that is a rivaling superpower that is trying to overtake the US, and in many cases have overtaken the US. Jamaica has opened up their country, opened up the Western Hemisphere to China, to the Chinese. Jamaica has brought the Chinese onto the US turf. That poses a problem, and Jamaicans are not thinking about it like that. You understand what I'm trying to say? We are creating another Ukraine situation. Mr. Andrew Holness and the Jamaican government and the Jamaican people must think about this. When I ask you the question, when I say to you, Donald Trump and the United States is demanding China to leave Jamaica now, no, it poses a problem because it's going to be difficult for China to do that. Huh?
Sir, whenever you're through, please,
Because
I just want to
they
say
have already
something.
invested. Unless Donald Trump is going to pay off the Chinese for what they have done, and then take over and pick up from where the Chinese have left. Unless that's the case, and then of course, will the Chinese do that? I don't know. But then of course there could be a war because Trump could decide to invade Jamaica. Trump could decide to do what Russia is doing to Ukraine, because Zelensky is decided not to change. He decided to still go ahead and work with the Europeans, with the enemy. Okay, Jamaica. What will Jamaica do? Will Jamaica acquiesce? Will Jamaica say to the Chinese, listen, we are no longer going to do business with you, okay, because it is posing a problem, and we don't want a situation like Ukraine, where Donald Trump, who is friends with Vladimir Putin, is sending troops here or playing us in a way. They don't have to bomb us. They don't have to engage us in a war. Jamaica is a very small country, okay. They could do, and it would be different. You would not want to lose Jamaica, as it's a very important country in the Caribbean. But they can find other ways to impose their will. The fact of the matter is, the U.S. controls the American part of the hemisphere, in the West, in this part of the world. Okay, and not only that, where Jamaica is, this is the gateway to trading in the world, and this part of the hemisphere. Jamaica, Europe, Africa. The problem with this is that China is a rival to the US. China doing business. Not only are they sending cars and stuff, but they are here. The Chinese are here, and they are heavily invested in Jamaica, from the east to the west, from the north to the south. Okay, They control Jamaica's transportation system or roadway system and the infrastructure. Okay, they are controlling the harbor. Okay, and they're modernizing the harbor too. They're modernizing the harbor and so on. But the problem is, it poses a problem. The U.S. should have done that a long time. If they know that Jamaica is so unique and the gateway to the world, they should have been invested. But the problem is, over the years, the U.S. has invested in Jamaica. If you read my book, Neoliberalism, through the IMF and the World Bank, and giving them aid, and it has not helped Jamaica. What it did was to make us into a dependency. Okay, we have had to pay back huge debts. to our detriment, and we have devalued our currency. Yes, we have deunionized. We have opened up our country to the penetration from the north, which has also created the economic positioning of Jamaica. But the fact of the matter is, yes, irrespective of that, we cannot then say that we're going to run it and do business with the Chinese, because that can create a problem. Because if we were going to do business with Canada, that's different, okay. Yeah. But we're going to go do business clear with China. If we say we're going to do business with the UK, that's different. But the UK only wanted to send millions of dollars to build prisons in Jamaica to send deportees or to send their prisoners. That doesn't. But 60 million is probably. But you have to be able to do something. You understand what I'm trying to say? Jamaica you have to pick your poison. Okay, are you going to go in bed with China? I don't know if Jamaicans want that. You understand what I'm trying to say? So I am going to follow this and see where it goes.
Okay, sir. So I don't know if that's a break for me to interject. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can anyone hear me? All right. So I'm listening to sir, and I don't know how to feel, because the truth is that I hear sir coming down so hard on China. But I don't know if it's a case that sir live in Jamaica and realize what is going on. Because I can say when me get my little pay, a Chinese man me go buy my little food because it's cheaper. It might not be always be the best, but it's cheaper and it makes me survive. Majority of us who leave school with no degree, no this, no excitement, them going to one little wholesale and them get a little money and them get paid. The roads, the so forth and so forth, that China has been helping Jamaica a lot. So, yes, we don't want to cross USA, but when China is asked to leave Jamaica, it's going to hurt us a lot, because I do believe China do more good for Jamaica than America. And that's the truth. We get up and go start talking. I want to look at Chinese wholesale.
Who's talking?
We go to the Chinese man and go buy the grocery at one time and so forth, sir.
Christina, I heard your point, and I don't have anything against China, just so you know. I'm just as a commentator and an analyst, I'm sharing with you. I don't live in Jamaica right now, but I'm sharing with you. This is conversations people must have, though. You can't just say, I'm not going to say that, we should just do it and leave it. I'm just saying that as academics, as spiritual people, you don't make a difference and things don't change without having the conversation. Jamaica has been at this place before and it hasn't helped us significantly. And we have also dogged ourselves by our politicians being corrupt, using the money for their own benefit, or they can't find the money, so on and so forth. But
Sir McKenzie, my hand was raised about an hour ago.
Yes, outside.
But I just wanted to say,
outside of that, I'm not just talking about going to the corner man to buy. I live in Philadelphia. We have Chinese shop here. That's not the problem. I don't think that is. I think you have to look at it in terms of large scale. Okay. In terms of modernizing the taking over the ports, transportation and so on, certain systems, and so I think we have to look at it in terms how do we respond to that? Yes, go ahead, Julie.
Sir, Christina, she's my batchmate, the young lady that I respect a lot, but I have to differ when it comes on to the Chinese and their investments in Jamaica. If we're going to really look at their way and the things that they're doing, for instance, the road infrastructure, they demand real estate as pay, and they get some prime real estates in Jamaica.
Wait.
Let me finish.
Go ahead, Julian. Go ahead, finish.
If you talk with a person who works with the Chinese in these wholesales, some of them barely get minimum wage. There's no health benefit. There's no insurance. So sometimes they get sick. A young lady from my community got sick some time ago. No assistance, and I mean, it's in that place, the chemicals and stuff. And look at it. Portia Simpson's government, Portia Simpson would come out like every month and say, "Oh, 20,000 Jamaicans got jobs." It's with the Chinese. There's no benefit for these people. They just, it's to me, it's slavery. They enslave them. One young lady from my community here was working with them, and they would move her from the cash register to go downstairs and clean the toilets, because when they go to use those toilets, they stand on them. And I mean, they have to be clean. She have to be cleaning up feces until she left. They enslave the people. If you should go and talk to some of these people who work with these Chinese, there are no benefits. They come and they profiteer off the country, and they rape the country, and they bring their gods and their idols and their culture, and our people are just, and even the roads that they have invested in, even the ports. They bought the one there done by Kaiser in Manchester, and they interviewed all these jobs, land acquisition officers, all these jobs. I was even called in for an interview, but this was just a facade. Their aim is to control the ports, and I'm telling you, they have. I'm not saying I have anything against China, but they have.
Of course, listen, man. Of course, you are right.
They interviewed hundreds of people and no jobs, because it's like a protocol for them to call people into interview. But the aim is not to employ people; it's to get a hold of the port to bring in their goods without paying the fees that are necessary, because they own the ports. And they're shipping all of these things that can't even fit Jamaican people. Plus size. Most Jamaicans are plus size. If we really look at it, we will see that we don't really benefit from the Chinese being here. They take over the businesses. It's not beneficial to Jamaica.
Guys, by the way, hey, do we have any Jamaicans living in China? We're fine if the US, if Donald Trump were to pass a policy that prevents me from sending remittances to Jamaica, I know that's gonna affect me, but no, or say, we're gonna have to pay huge sums of taxes if we send money, which affect us. Let me ask a question. But since the Chinese are no friends with Jamaica, do we have Chinese? Do we have people? Do we have Jamaicans living in China that can send remittances to Jamaica?
So, sir, remittance alone will live for?
No, Jamaica. No, I'm just asking. And it's, of course, it's more than that.
It's a joke.
Yeah, we're saying. Wait, no. One more question. By the way, I have one more. By the way, the roads are awful. By the way, guys, come on now, man. The roads are Jesus. Oh my God, the roads.
Which part of the road,
no. But my God, only nigga put more.
Sir, we don't go to the place that has the most mosquitoes and sun. Please come again. Which one you're referring to?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Listen, let me tell you.
It's true. The roads are bad. I live.
The roads are bad. Oh, yo,
it costs me a lot.
Lot of accidents. Oh, Jesus, I'm telling you, man. Secondly, but they are investing. Secondly, dependency. We talk about the issue of dependency. Oh my God, the fact that we now have to go to China to get all of this money for lease up 50 years. I mean, I'm just saying that why is it that we still have to be going to China though? Why we still have to go why we have to be still going to these superpowers? The third and last thing, if I stop and let you guys talk, is we give away too much all the time. We give away too much. Like, I don't know. We don't know. It is as if we don't know how to negotiate. And then I saw the Canadian people come here the other day, like they want to come do business with us. And I said, don't let them come and do business. The other day, they passed a draconian policy against Jamaica. And suddenly, they are facing tariffs. They want to come to Jamaica and try and do business with us. Anyways, go ahead, guys.
So personally for me, I wish we never let go of a Nigel Clark, because I feel like I'm going to find a way to wiggle way where we can get a battle, because I think we need to find out we can't give up China completely, and we don't want a problem with America. Because you see America behave when them destroy
they're
country.
Like children when you take them candy from them, like they're literal children.
Yeah, so sir, with me personally, that is why I think IMF draw Nigel, because don't know. I never liked certain things that he did.
Yeah.
But if IMF called upon him, I believe that he must there make some big move. And I feel like that is a great loss. So maybe with a wiggle way where we can get local money from China and still keep friends. I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think it was just too. I think we're just giving away too much, though. I just really think, and we have to. When Jamaicans make decisions, and when the small countries, vulnerable nations, we have to. We can't be foolhardy. As I know, we talk about, we should be able to do, but we do whatever we want to do. But we must remember that, we all live in we live in a world with a framework, with a geopolitical. Until we get to a place where we have become fully independent, we're fully free to do whatever we want to do without the threat of penetration or the threat of a superpower, we still have to be careful and we have to be strategic in terms of how we do things. I just didn't realize it was just too much. I think right now, if we ever default on our loan, and we have there have never been an instant where where Jamaica has not defaulted on our. We have defaulted, and we have had to make renegotiate. And it had affected us. In terms of doing business with China, what does it mean to default on a loan with China? We already know what it would be like to do business with the US. What does it now feel like to do business with the China when you can't pay your loan?
All right, so sir, the question is, and as I keep trying to ask, we keep referring to things as loan. Is there any proof that we have gotten a loan? I know that the road, right? They bought out the majority of the shares after China's investment on Russia. First infrastructure fine, they did their deal. It did, whether by whatever the case may be, right? And China stepped in. Is it an investment or a loan? Because the two of them is two different things, An investment is investment and a loan is a loan. What evidence or what proof do we have that we've been receiving loans from China versus an investment?
It's potato or tomato.
It's not, sir.
It's
not, sir.
The Chinese expect return on their investment.
Understandable, but you just hold on. But we are talking about defaulting on a loan.
Yeah.
One is not equal to the other. Expecting an investment means that they have an infrastructure. Like when Russia had the highway at first, that all of the money for a certain amount of years went to them, and then after that years was up, then the money went to Jamaica. If it's the same or similar agreement that was brokered for China, there is no way we can default because the money automatically goes to them. Now, if it is a loan, and I'm speaking from my accounting background, a loan is something that if you miss a payment, you might be able to get away with 1 month or 2 months. But after that, you've become a liability and they're going to want to recoup all of that money. So that is a problem. So that's two different things. Investment is investment, loan is a loan.
I'm going to tell you this. And okay, fine. Sometimes I deliberately don't say stuff but I'm going to say this. Jamaica has, first of all, way back in 2017, Jamaica announced a $384 million loan. So yes, they have gotten a loan from China, from the Import-Export Bank to build a road network on the island to complement their $730 million highway built in 2017 in return for a 5-year concession to the Chinese construction company that includes land alongside the highway to be used. So yes.
So that 5 years would have taken it up to 2022, 2023, correct?
Yeah, 22. Yes. And they have.
So we're now in 2025 though.
No, but what I'm saying is that I don't want to split ears because in terms of detail, because we know what we're talking about. Whether it is investment or whether it is loan. Okay. Some loans are a type of investment. And there are others that's not, okay? What we do know is that China is heavily invested in Jamaica. The question is, can we afford, how do Jamaicans feel about China's investment in Jamaica where they require heavy returns over a certain amount of period, okay? And we are hearing your classmate also talk about the fact that in some instances, they have had to give up land, or there are land exchanges and deals. So
And
what we know is
again,
that
sir,
what we
not,
know that there
sir,
is
give me a
a
second.
what we
I'm
do
not
know
trying to.
what we do know is that there is a what we do know is that Jamaica has received loans and investments from the Chinese with a promise of return. We know that. Now, the problem is that the US, I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the deal because that's not the purpose of this class. What I'm asking is that is it something that as a Caribbean people that we can is it something that we can support based on the history, our history of getting support from superpowers, China, I mean the US, no China, that has not augured well for the Caribbean, that had not resulted in any meaningful gains for the Caribbean, but have pushed us back. And not only that, now we are faced with an additional situation where the US, who we have enjoyed a long-standing relationship with, that has also provided aid and protect to Jamaica, but provided also Jamaica benefits from American security, so on and so forth, and many other things. I mean, can we afford to tarnish the relationship that we share with the US, irrespective of what that relationship for a new relationship with what we don't know what's going to look like? Is it something? And that's all. And then, of course, you will ask that question with other question, but yet still the question remain: what will the ramifications look like? If there are any, can you bear them? You have to do a cost. We have to do a cost benefit analysis. A cost benefit. What's the cost? What are the risks? What are the costs? What are the gains? Okay, to doing business with China. The risks, the opportunity cost and trade-off. The opportunity cost and trade-off of making an economic decision, of doing business with one, is the risk of losing business with another, and also the gains. Now, the thing is, what the gains? Can we afford to lose those gains? And one, are the costs greater than the gains? So those are questions you will have to ask yourselves and you will have to answer. Geopolitical positioning. We have to think about point to other countries that have suffered the wrath or that have been impacted by severing relationship with another superpower. That has not no country in the history of this world. Of course, we can speak idealistically. We can speak idealistically, but realistically, no country in the history of this world, okay, has ever been able to do what you are saying that Jamaica can do. No, I'm not saying I'm of course I'm speaking to you guys, and I'm from Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica. I live in the US for years. By being in I talk about the issue of brain drain, but then again, brain drain has also helped Jamaica. So and of course I'm recording these superpowers have played political football with smaller countries. I am not advocating for the US, and I'm not advocating for Jamaica. I've already said that I'm an independent. I give God thanks for the opportunity of being here. And if you guys are listening in the US and you hear this, yes, thank you for allowing me to come here and the opportunity.
Sir?
You said, wait, no, to send money back to Jamaica. Okay. So when I was saying to you that Christinia, that's what I meant. Let me be careful, because I'm not going to punish the hand that feed me and that bless my family and my ability to be able to send money back to Jamaica and do what I do. Okay? I mean, That's the point I was making, but I think you think I was pointing to something else. You understand? Okay. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying that I have to exit now. My apologies. I have to exit now, okay?
Well, let me tell you guys were great. In fact, you guys should write an article. You guys should have discussions in your churches, in your schools, in your community.
Sir, if we had your type of discussion in my church, I would have been put out and more than likely said I am possessed. So
that is the problem. You see that, Roshane? What you may tell you? You can't even and this is good. I love how you come at your professor. That's how I am. I usually come at people like that. That's how I come at my professors. So I cannot expect you guys not to come at me like that. Okay? So, and that's fine. If I had hatred in my heart no, this is good. I love this.
No, sir, I didn't mean to be. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, and I'm just saying that's how the elders in the church would approach it.
For real? What church you go to? What church you go to? What church you go to?
That's fine, sir. I'm just saying we're being recorded. I don't want to.
You're right. You're right.
Anybody
you're right. You're right. You're right.
On this podcast, I'm not diminishing my church.
Let me tell you, no, we are just having a conversation as academics, okay, to facilitate conversations across the length and breadth of the Caribbean so that now they can make the decision. Okay, anything that we say here is never meant to put down anyone, but it's just to facilitate conditions. We are all being philosophers, like Socrates talking with Plato. That's what's happening here, and we are putting it out there, and we are looking at all the possibilities and so on. So this is good. This is good. And then so thank you, Roshane. Don't think that I love your input. I love the spirit of it, your energy. And then the last word is Heather. Go ahead.
No, sir. I was just asking regarding to the assignment that was due for today.
What was due again?
It was about the critical thinking, but I know that you said that those who haven't done it, no need to pressure themselves in doing it. But I was just asking, what about the persons who have done it? Or is it going to be graded?
Yes, it will be graded. Okay. So, but I'm giving you all time to submit it over the next all the work that you need to submit that I've asked you to. You have 2 to 3 weeks to submit that. But there's no more reflection paper to submit. All you have to do is your group work. Start preparing for that. Okay. All right.
Okay, so
all the reflection.
Quick question: when is the group work? At the end of the month or the first week of April?
No, you guys will be presenting in class. So each group will get to present 30 minutes, and so we start with group 1, 2, 3. Whichever group want to present first. I think Chantel has a list that shows the group. So when I come back next week, I'm going to send them on a paper. And then you guys get to choose what week, who wants to start presenting. But we're going to start presenting week after next, okay? Not next week, but the following week you get to present. But, you guys are doing very well so far. I like the energies. I mean, if you guys continue like this, there's no midterm, okay? I'm telling you that. Huh?
So
Leroy? Where's the Leroy?
Yeah, when are you going to post the grade on Focus?
Thank you for that. I will post it. Thank you for your patience, but I'm going to post it next week.
No problem.
Give me 2 weeks to post it, but I'm giving you time so you can give me time. So I'm giving you time.
So is that the first? That's the first work we submitted, right?
Yes, the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Oh, the first work, I'll give it. I'll put the grade in by Sunday, okay? Because I already started. I'll put it in by Sunday, okay?
That's the Amamazama one, right?
Right.
Yes,
right.
that's the one.
Yeah. Leroy, don't I know you from somewhere?
Hey, Glory, not sure.
I thought I know you.
I think this would be the best time for us to exit. Thank you so much for your knowledge. We appreciate you so much. Have yourself a wonderful day, evening, sir. May the Lord bless and keep you. May God His light shine upon you.
Oh, yes. Pray for us. You lead us in prayer. Let's pray, guys. Continue.
Eternal Churches, Father, mighty God, as we've gathered together, mighty God, we are all in different homes, in different locations. Mighty God, I ask that you will cover each and every one of us under your blood. Each and every one of us have different circumstances, different challenges. I pray that you will open our minds so that we'll absorb the things that you want us to learn so that we can all pass our exams. Mighty God, I pray that you'll cover our instructor. I pray that you'll give him wisdom. I pray that you'll give him understanding. I pray that you'll keep him in whatsoever he does. Whatsoever he touch will come to fruition, and all the great things that he's about to do in life, Lord. You will continue to cover him and bless him, bless his family and everything and everyone that's attached to him. As we separate one for another, Lord, we ask that you will just go with us, mighty God. Cover our homes, cover our husbands, our wives, our children. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Sir, Samir now.
Oh, what's up, Leroy?
I'm good, sir. You know me?
Yeah, man, you look familiar.
Hey, glory.
Which church you go?
Pentecostal.
Pentecostal. Well, you look so familiar, though.
I don't know.
Leroy, your wife now wait for the dinner?
Sir, you know,
Right.
Leroy
No,
shirt.
Huh?
You know, Leroy shirt, I'm shirt, official.
What shirt is that, though? Wait, what that?
Leroy, remember said it is being recorded. Can your shirt be shown online?
Wait, hold on. Let me press pause. Let me pause the recording.
Hi, boss.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Julian, bless up. Big up yourself. How do I end
this
thing again? How do I end this? End meeting for.